Bitter at one of your perks, after all it's communal in use. So you can come and hang till your legs go limp and they're shaking you loose. Now you watch 5 co-workers opt for the alternate exit, neatly suspended above where you wolf down your food. And your company gets its incentives embellished by harping on wellness, suggesting you'd best take time for your mental health after your 14 hours are through. Like we gave you a bottle to piss in and fixed up a noose on the crossbeam. Christ, what more can we do? So if you struggle to breathe any moment that you aren't asleep, then remember, most of Americans fear for their savings, fear for their shelter, fear for their babies. You aren't the fringe of exception, but rather a perfect example of capital's rule. And you're far less alone than the ruling class tells you is true. You're far less alone than the ruling class tells you is true. I see you crying in your cars, but I know.
When you are not with where majority of Americans are, and you know, that is extreme. That is an extreme way of thinking.
We'll do it live.
I really want to set you free, but I really want to let you be. And a part of me wished I could set myself aside, just let you take the ride, just chalk the rest up to destiny. I could let you believe that the only restraints in life are the size of your dreams. Let you believe each kid grows up with the world at their feet. When I know too well it's open season, I know they're taking stock and raising stocks and raising stock. And I'm simply not here to sit and watch as you learn the lesson all cogs are taught. Keep your head down and keep to task and just keep on blocking the rest of it all out. Just keep on with the rest of the herd of a million adjacent oblivious workers. The forest unseen for the trees, and the trees unseen for the fallout. No, what's more damning, baby, the truth or the ignorance? Fuck it, I honestly wonder if I see the answer so well. Baby, believe me well, I know it's scary, I scare myself. If I could find a way out of my head, I would run like hell. I would ditch this body politic, mindless occupant somewhere far from the dismal abyss. In the tranquil crystalline bliss of the beach, I could rest with the rest of the shells. And if anyone asks I'm anywhere else, if I'm really needed, just light the candle, then read the book, and then ring the bell. Oh, my untarnished heart, my little perfect soul, this world will melt your mercy down so they can sell its gold. This world will take your worth and then demand 1,000-fold. It's full of greedy pigs who'll eat you out of house and home. They'll strip your bank account and sweep you somewhere down the road. and then return to eat your tent and shitty bike you rode. Your bottled water, only shoes and coat and broken phone. Then smiling in your face, they'll tell you that the shelter's closed.
When you are not with where majority of Americans are, then, you know, that is extreme. That is an extreme way of thinking.
Hoped you would never find out, knew that you had to know. Pulling what's left of my mind out, trying to tell you so. I tried to block the light out, knew you could feel its glow. I've been here holding my hands out, trying to keep you close. Trying to keep you close. Oh, my untarnished heart, my little perfect soul. This world will melt your mercy down so they can sell its gold. This world will take your worth, then demand 1,000-fold. I tried to block the light just so I could keep you close. Land of the free, and you'll know us by the trail of dead. It's just one more world war to complete the set. When you live by the pike, you die by the pith. You die wide-eyed, still pleading the fifth, or crying divine epithets and pathetic attempts at defense. All empathetic for those on your side of the fence. Well, I'll gladly put you and your legacy into an alternate tense of faltering senses and altered events. Like hun, it ain't a hearse, it's a reaper's stretch. How sweet, she said. Bunch of hordes in the street like it's Evil Dead. Where the thin blue line meets razor's edge. And where the corporate ladder ascends to a steel-toed boot that awaits on the ledge. You'll be licking it fresh at your boss's request till it stomps each finger and watches you fall to your death. And drown in an ocean of debt. Gone with the fodder who gathered to honor the patient left, who purity tested themselves into sections, step by step, till the next election, when it's just one them and the sound of their well-read theorized breath. That's harm reduction for the lowly cost of you holding your nose and just openly buying the theft. Maybe that's all in the flick of the pen. Maybe we're all one unmarked van from a trip to the pen. Being guarded by pigs who exist on a diet of dying breaths of much worthier men. Honey, heaven's expecting you. Just don't get too hung up on who they let in. Just look up at the shine of the pearly gates. You don't need to worry if there's lead in the paint. You don't need to worry if there's lead in the water, lead in the milk, lead in the honey, lead in the caustic embrace of the Heavenly Father. Lead is the flavor of passive perpetual slaughter. Lead is the taste of us led to the ledge by the lure of the legend of expert consensus, and then beckon to stretch it just one step farther. And I hope all the folks who were boastfully gloating and toasting themselves as the heroes of COVID for boosting their boosters and doing their part are now equally thrilled to be starstruck martyrs. All laid in a government grave with anonymous markers, like you're back from the carvers and off to the splicer. You're the very first wave to be slain in the war against Pfizer. That 100 years war against Pfizer. They are thinning the crowd that is striking right now to bleed adequate pay from those inhuman misers, who all sit in their office and designate coffins to people regarded as nothing but profit for Kaiser. Still the Dems want you nicer. Dems want you softer. Dems want you kinder. Yeah, they all want you graciously starving in silence. You will speak when you're spoken to. Rest of the time, you and all of us peasants are merely depressing statistics neglected in Congress's binders. All bled, bone dry, then fed to the grinder. Our headstones lie in each step as reminders. That's a lesson in object permanence learned in the furnace by workers consigned to the fire. Workers bled, bone dry, then fed by the fed to the grinder. Fed by the fed to the grinder. Now the fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Now the fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. And the fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, bleeds you dry, then dines on the dead. The fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. The fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. The fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your mind, that it grinds yourself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Here's where our leaders would see us all led.
Just an off-the-cuff chat between you and me. Us. We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
Who are these people?
It's us. We're these people.
I love that intro. I love that intro so much.
I'm here with a different co-host this time, Oz LaFave.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me on.
Friend of the show, DJ Joe Nice. How are you, friend?
What's good?
And you hear Nick say this all the time. The United States is the most propagandized country in the world.
We are so fucked, you guys. Again, I'm sorry for being cynical, but seriously, we're fucked. We are fucked. We are well and truly fucking fucked.
Just appreciate all the work that you do and the platforms that you all are providing.
Hey, you. Doing good. How are you guys doing?
I think as independent media, we have a responsibility to be, we don't hide our bias, obviously, but we must stay true to the facts.
What's up, Pam?
Cheers and salutations. Welcome if you got them.
But I am here with a man that I've been waiting to talk to for the last couple of years, Nico House.
As an educator, what I would suggest is that, first of all, podcasts like these are made.
So you need to be an example for the people and for the future, knowing that your words can actually change the future.
What do you feel? What would Kwame Ture feel we would have to do?
Well, politics is every day of every minute. You have to be aware of what's going on. Not voting on one day, so the vote has never meant anything. So I'm not a Democrat.
See, I would call that guy the Black Obama.
No. The issues that we talk about, listen to us.
As always, kids, labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
INN News
Yeah, Iron News.
It is Wednesday, my dudes.
It's another Wednesday. But, welcome to the brainworm freest show on Wednesday you could be watching. It's Iron News. I'm Reef Breland. Welcome to Collin Radix-Carter, my co-host as always. Hey, Care Bear. Are you Care Bear? You got the brainworms in there? We gotta get those brainworms taken care of. Okay.
No, I'm good. I think
that's fun.
We think besides the brainworms are in maybe in the minds of our government officials.
Yes.
Perhaps.
Yes.
But I'm good.
Yep.
But how are you?
I'm doing okay.
Mr. Reef?
I'm doing fine. Not as well as you can do in the dystopian nightmare that we call Earth. But yeah, we brought some stories this week. We did that like we do every week. What'd you bring?
So this is probably one of the biggest news stories this week. Despite Hamas agreeing to a deal, what we knew was going to happen, Israel decides to invade Rafah anyway, which is currently starting as we speak. So we are going to talk about that and just more. I think we got some updates as of within the last couple of hours that I do want to highlight a little bit as part of the story. And then we have a Substack article from Jonathan Cook, who is a journalist based in the UK. And he spoke at a pro-Palestine event in Bristol some time back. And from that speech he gave, he wrote this article as to why the media failed Gaza. So we are going to take a look at what he said. And what do you got, Reef?
Well, I brought this. We've been meaning to do this story for a couple of weeks about the racist origins of Zionism, particularly its anti-Arab stance. And I felt it prominent with some, brothers and sisters online taking a few swings and misses on this subject. So I figured we'd do some edumacation and get people squared away on that.
Which we do here.
We try to, yes. And
we try to.
I also brought probably the other biggest story this week, that Al-Jazeera got banned from Israel. So we'll get into that and what happened there. Not the first time that Al-Jazeera has had some shit happen to them over there, so par for the course, but gotta cover the stuff, so we're gonna do that. Press freedom's press freedom. It's important to us. So, and I think you brought an extra story, yes?
We do have an extra story today. So we are going to talk about Macklemore. So many of you know he released a single, Hind's Hall, that he released on Monday. It's gotten quite the buzz, especially in our space. So we're going to do this as kind of like a reaction to it. So we'll do that first. But before we get there, as you guys know, YouTube hates us and has demonetized us, looking like forever at this point. But you can support us through Ko-fi or Coffee, however you pronounce it, at that link below. Or if you forget the link while we're running our segments, you can type in !donate. It will pull up the link for you. Or if you use your phone to scan the QR code, you can give to us through there. The good thing is that every single one of your donations will go to us entirely. There are no cuts or any things off the top that we have to worry about now. So that's probably one of the best things we can do with regards to that. Right now, we're trying to raise money for Jesse to get a new laptop, and by the looks of it, we're more than halfway there. Let's see if we can try and secure that for him by the end of this month. Can we do that, please?
Be nice.
Because I'm sure he would love it, you know, in terms of creating some new tunes and some more spoken word for us to listen to. But thank you guys for your continuous support. As we say, you know, obviously take care of your families first, take care of your personal needs first, take care of your community needs first. But if you have some extra, you know, and you feel compelled to give, we would appreciate that. More importantly, though, we appreciate the word of mouth. People are, you know, talking about us online. So please like, share, and subscribe to us, especially since we are heavily suppressed. The algorithm hates us too. So any support we get in that way, just to kind of help elevate, you know, the network a little bit, we will also appreciate. We
can also go
will
to
appreciate anyone.
You can also go to rumble.com/C, that's Indie News Network, you know, in case YouTube decides to not like us even more than it already does. You can also go to Rockfin. I've linked both those things in the chat below. It's also linked at our Linktree at indienews.network. You'll be able to find all the links to all our network channels there. Go to Cash App, little money sign, Indie News Network. You want to get that way. Patreon.com/Indie News Network. Another way you can sign up for monthly donos if you wish. Keep the lights on, as you see. A lot of light to keep on. You know what I'm saying? A lot of light. But anyway, let's get started with your first story.
Yep. So this is our extra story for tonight. We'll make this quick, somewhat. But you were kind of like, about this story, but I felt it's kind of important somewhat to kind of talk about in light of another story that you brought up a couple of weeks ago, which connects with this. And I think we've had more of a deeper discussion regarding this since then. And I think we could probably share, you know, with you guys, with our fam, as well as you guys can maybe talk about this in the chat. But as you guys probably know by now, on Monday, Macklemore released his new single, Hind's Hall. That's the name of Hamilton Hall that was occupied at Columbia University last week. That's what the students renamed it when they occupied it. And obviously, Hind's Rajab is the 6-year-old girl who was killed by the IDF when she was trying to be rescued, I think, several months ago. So Macklemore named
dedicated
this
to
single in memory kind of dedicated to her, but also to the occupation of Hamilton Hall. Obviously, due to copyright, we cannot play the video, and
I can play it for us.
Put an age restriction on it, so we will surely get hit with a copyright strike on that. So please go and watch it on YouTube if you have not done so already.
Yeah.
But that being said, we have the wonderful, comparable Caitlin Johnstone, who does her thing and did an opinion piece that her husband, what's her husband's name?
I forget.
Tim Foley.
Tim Foley, that's
right?
it. I hope so. I should be easy. Do you know what Foley? Have you ever heard of the word Foley? The actual term Foley? It's just very funny that he's doing Foley work as a Foley for Caitlin Johnstone.
Right.
It's just kind of ironic.
So Caitlin did an opinion piece regarding Macklemore's single that Tim Foley, and he does this. If you go to her website, you know, her husband reads her articles. So in case you want more of an audible experience to our articles, you can listen to him read them. So we're gonna listen to him read Caitlin's article regarding the Macklemore single, and we will continue to talk more about it.
Opposing the war machine is cool again, and the Empire's getting nervous. American rapper Macklemore has released a single titled Hind's Hall, the name given to Columbia University's Hamilton Hall by anti-genocide protesters in honor of the 6-year-old Hind Rajab who was murdered in Gaza by Israeli forces. The artist says all proceeds from the track will go to UNRWA. The song, with its accompanying video, is such a scathing indictment of the US-backed destruction of Gaza that Google-owned YouTube promptly age-restricted it. Macklemore attacks Biden, the brutal police crackdowns on protesters, the conflation of anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, US politicians, and the Israel lobby, with lines that will haunt you for days like, "The Nakba never ended, the colonizer lied." This marks the first really mainstream artist to take on this issue in their chosen medium with a track intended for widespread circulation. It probably won't be the last. Opposing the Gaza genocide is quickly moving from the right thing to do to the cool thing to do, which is a major problem for the empire. The empire can handle being on the wrong side of an issue. It has all the media and mainstream culture manufacturing institutions on its side, which allows it to frame public perception of that issue in a way that quells dissent. What it absolutely cannot handle is a critical mass of young people deciding the imperial murder machine sucks, and that opposing it is fun and makes you cool. That's when dissent takes on a momentum of its own. As long as opposing militarism and imperialism is just the morally correct thing to do, it will always be a marginal position in an information ecosystem that's controlled by the powerful, because simply being on the right side of an issue has little natural magnetism of its own. But the instant it moves from being about morality to being fun and cool, it suddenly starts crackling with energy and drawing in huge numbers of people who normally wouldn't be that interested on their own. The empire has no answer to this. Seriously, how can a bunch of boring empire managers in DC and Virginia hope to compete once that happens? What are they going to do? Win the young back by writing another Wall Street Journal think piece? Have Netanyahu rap about how Zionism is rad while Tony Blinken plays guitar? They got nothing. This crackling excitement behind an anti-war protest movement hasn't happened since the 60s, and the empire had to retreat from Vietnam with its tail between its legs and dramatically restructure Western civilization before it could recover from it. And all the empire managers who worked on solving that problem are dead and gone now. The people working on it now have never had to deal with anything like this, which is why it took them by surprise. The empire managers of today have only ever encountered protests against the war machine that were either very small or short-lived and easily diverted. This one's only gaining momentum 7 months in. And the Northern Hemisphere's summer hasn't even started yet. I guarantee you the swamp monsters are scheming very hard to try and shut this thing down before summer starts, because the kids are going to have a whole lot of fun at their expense if they can't.
Thoughts, Reef?
Well, I think it was Neil Diamond, I do believe, that said he can hear the, drums of summer. So, that's in that Kent State piece he did. So that's what I'm worried about necessarily, is how much are they going to crack down on a lot of this. But I have seen a lot of talk about how this is being the cool thing now and trying to dismiss it because it's the cool thing, right? That people don't know what they're actually protesting. They're just there to be cool and get laid and whatnot. So, I think that is a problem for the empire.
Yeah, I mean, there is going to be, and we talked about this last week, there is going to be some people who are just in it, for the funsies or whatever, but the problem is, like, the way it's being framed and smeared in the media is, these are pro-Hamas protesters, they don't know what they're talking about, and yet I barely see any mainstream media having people on to kind of talk about it. Like,
Right.
have some of these college students on to kind of talk about why they're there, but basically what we're seeing online is, a lot of hate for these college students who, are protesting. And many of them, I would argue, if not overwhelming fair majority of them, know what their demands are. And to kind of go along with that, I mean, we talked about how Macklemore spoke at the Pro-Palestine rally in DC that I went to back in November. And now he has come out with the single regarding the movement. And I think don't want to say overwhelmingly, but I would say a fair majority of people that we know in the space generally liked, the song, but it did get some hate. And I can argue for those people. I understand the hate. Given Macklemore's history, given, like, obviously he has been claimed to, steal, styles from, rap, black artists especially. But, that being said, I can also make the argument that every white music artist basically steals from black people.
Everything's derivative
artists.
now. Every
Right,
artist is stealing from all the artists they've listened to before. It's not,
right.
Like.
So, yeah, I think people had, from what I did see, a few that I did see had an issue that it was Macklemore who
Yeah.
did this versus like if it were to say like Kendrick or Drake, who we also know is kind of hot right now, given their
Right.
beef, quote unquote, that they're having right now.
Yeah, but
I
no one
think
else
that
is.
would have been a lot more.
No one else is talking about this. I know of maybe 4 MCs that are either like MC Abdul, Low Key. I think there's another one that hangs around with Low Key MC something or other. I can't remember
our very
his
own
name,
Jesse Jet.
unfortunately. Jesse Jet, of course. There's a few people. There's another Jesse I saw that was talking about Netanyahu and war isn't murder and stuff like that. Recently did a Boeing piece. But like these are heavily independent, like barely have an audience,
right?
Like, not saying that in a bad way, but like it's hard for them to get the reach because of what they talk about, clearly,
Right.
and I think
So,
Macklemore is just finding that out, but
right, but I think especially on YouTube, as I said earlier, like YouTube put an age restriction on it, so
yeah.
But as I said to you, I think as we were prepping for this story last night, is this song going to win a Grammy? Probably not. Is this song going to get massive radio play? Also, probably not.
Right.
But the idea that Macklemore found a lane that, as of this point, no mainstream artist has even attempted to do yet. I mean, say what you want about Macklemore, but at least he did something. Towards uplifting, especially college students right now who are protesting. And the idea that the other thing was, oh, this seems calculated, just given the timing, in terms of, like, oh, this is kind of taking in the way of, Drake and Kendrick. That was the other thing. And I'm kind of like, well, we're going to get into why. Well, I really wasn't even into this beef. Many of you know I got my cousin got married over the weekend, and actually my cousin very briefly was kind of into it, just as he was getting married, and he was asking me about it, like, what do you think of all this? I'm like, I don't fucking care, because it's like no, but it's just
two
so,
rich
like,
assholes
and I like
arguing,
Kendrick, right, over nothing, really. But we're gonna get to them in a minute.
I think that's the thing with it. If you've been following it, there's a lot more. It's a lot more than just like arguing. There's a lot of like seedy music business crap behind it, including talks about Lucian, who we've talked about, talks about Clive Davis, who we've talked about, like a lot of these like things that are connected to Vanguard and the private prison system, and how they've manipulated hip hop, and like and they've installed people that they're comfortable with and get blackmail on. I think that's part of the thing. I think it was Kendrick's calling Drake a colonizer, essentially, for how he's acting in the music industry. So I think that's part of it. This Toronto kid used to play on Degrassi, like Silver Spoon from the start sort of problem. So, not that I'm sure Kendrick hasn't made his sacrifices, but he brought this tweet.
Well, it's actually a thread that I think really it speaks to what I had been thinking about very well. So this is from @Julian Akil Rose, who tweeted, "Y'all let Macklemore drop a song like this before you," which referring to, I think, generally anyone in hip hop.
Yeah.
But I think especially probably Black artists, especially.
Right.
So he continued. "I swear, Ninja's been saying hip hop was revolutionary. That's why so many of these ninjas are culture warriors, culture vultures, right? Because they don't comment on social issues. Some of the biggest, most historic social issues happening, multiple genocides, it's crickets from your real rappers. Folks are silent to protect a bag. Do that make them a sellout or what? Talk to me." Anyway, shout out to @LaRussellCG for actually saying something months ago, and shout out to @_ArtCoop for organizing artists to be grounded in justice movements. Embarrassing for both them rappers, again, for referring to Kendrick and Drake, I assume, that I've just made that had ample time for their beef, LOL, especially because 40 has been posting about Palestine nonstop, and it seems like he really cares. But these people are corporations in and of themselves, so that's rap, I guess. LMFAO. All of you, it's not our fight, people. Nothing about you revolutionary either, LMAO. So I don't care about what you think is or isn't your fight. Some of y'all mad I tweeted this. Who the F is supposed to hold the line for what hip-hop is supposed to be? We keep saying nothing about our rappers saying nothing, and after a while, people forget what this ish could be. It's already happening. Nah. Either you all stop saying hip-hop's revolutionary, or you help try to make it that way. Artists should feel ridiculous for A, not learning enough about social issues to be proficient, B, not learning, and then also not donating / amplifying, C, not using art to further movements. And if you read this as shade towards Macklemore, it's quite the opposite. Hip-hop is back this week, though. I can't believe I'm still going on, but I woke up mad. You don't become a mega millionaire off rap if you haven't gone commercial in some way. You don't become a mega millionaire off rap without watering down messages. You don't accumulate wealth without some form of extraction and hoarding. People have lost track of the fact that all entertainment industries decided they could sell stories of Black suffering so long as it didn't ultimately point people to actual resistance.
Yep.
Simply talking about struggle is not in of itself revolutionary. And that's the plot folks have lost. And I can add, probably in our space, not sorry to say that, that also applies to us. You know, just talking about revolutionary matters or things that should matter is not the same as actually doing it and being a part of a struggle. So I really like what that tweet in particular, I think just as it refers to anyone who has a voice or has a platform to make your voice amplified, to elevate social causes, to have people actually do something about it.
Yeah.
It makes a difference when you're out there, you know, making those moves yourself versus just talking about it or singing about it or rapping about it, but then not, you know, going all the way in terms of the things that you are talking about. But anyway, and people don't want to accept or recognize this because they don't want to believe their favorite artists are also part of de-radicalization and commercialization of hip-hop, because that would mean we as fans are also a part of it. Surprise! F it, I'm still going. If it's not our problem, okay, well, they're also not challenging people in power about shit happening directly to Black people in America, are they? Cop City, Biden giving 100 million to cops, these fuck-ass Black mayors, medical apartheid, where the F are they? Let's be clear, they're not participating in any part of a struggle towards revolution. FAO, be serious. The best we get out of these ninjas is to vote for the segregationists. If you think your issues are separate, that's on you. Why aren't these rappers supporting the issues you think they are yours either? Right. And I think that's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't heard any rappers as of late. Now, granted, I don't listen to hip-hop like that now, but I haven't heard of any hip-hop artists who have talked about Cop City, who have talked about what's happening in Haiti, what's happening in Congo. Like we talked about last week, the Morehouse students brought to their president in terms of like, why are you having Joe Biden on our campus to speak at our commencement when he hasn't done shit for Black people locally? Like, they brought that to him.
I've heard rap and songs about Cop City and about, whatever, but I follow the shit. I'm in it. We're in Twitter every day.
Well, let me rephrase mainstream. Mainstream.
That's what I mean. Like, and if you are talking about those things, they never let you touch mainstream stuff ever. Like you're relegated to, YouTube or some other platform, and then they still demonetize you and push you down then if you are. So they still control a lot of the, this has been the problem with the music industry as a whole. They still control a lot of the publication of it, and like, it's only until now you've started seeing more independent publication, but we've seen Spotify censor low key. We've seen, lots of that kind of stuff happen. So, I get to some degree why it's happening. At the same time, like, I would like more of that counterculture to be part of that, music genre for sure. Yeah. So not that it isn't happening, like, bro, you talk about the people in the ciphers and whatever, they spit that shit, and some of the old hat rappers that you don't hear much about, they still do that. They get on mics, they freestyle about this stuff, bring up Julian Assange, they bring up WikiLeaks, they bring this stuff up, but you'll never hear that outside of once or twice on the radio that someone didn't catch, like, so, there's a few, but like, where's Toby?
Idea of
where's Toby and Wigway in the middle of Atlanta? Where's, Houston, my bad. Like, there's some people who pride themselves on talking about issues in their songs who haven't touched this. So, like, I'm not saying they won't. I'd like to see that. That'd be nice. I'm sure some of those guys could go extra hard on that. Post Contra, there's a few out there. But you brought this from DJ Joe Nice, right?
Right. So shout out to our friend of the show, DJ Joe Nice. I saw this post on Instagram, so I pulled it and gave him credit on Twitter for this. So actually, if you scroll down, Reef, I want to read. If you scroll down, I want to read what Joe Nice said on Instagram first. By the way, follow him there. By the way, so speaking of Kendrick and Lamar, for those keeping score, 1, Kendrick Lamar is signed to Universal Music Group. 2, Aubrey Graham Drake is signed to Universal Music Group. 3, the CEO of Universal Music Group is Lucian Lagrange, a pro-Israel billionaire and Zionist supporter. 4, Lucian Lagrange is a defendant in the Sean Combs, P. Diddy, Puffy, whatever his name is, court case. This just in, Kendrick versus Drake is a distraction. This bullshit takes attention away from Israel and their continued genocide of Palestinians in Rafah. It also turns down the heat on Sean Combs. If you think a fake rap beef is, quote unquote, for the culture, you might need to consider other activities. So well, again, as I said, I didn't care for the Drake-Kendrick beef, manufactured beef as what it is. I did not know that Drake and Kendrick were on the same music label. Yeah. You said that Drake might not be, but at least at minimum, he probably might be.
I think Kendrick might not be.
Right.
Kendrick might also have some independent stuff that he pulled together. I say
right, but I'm sure like they might be a subsidiary of Universal, maybe, possibly. So, but either way, and we did talk, and you talked about this story regarding Diddy and the circle of friends that he have, all of which are Zionist, and how Lucian Lagrange, essentially is essentially his lawyer to kind of cover up for Diddy right now. So it definitely does make sense given the heat that Diddy has had, and now I think he's trying to keep a very low profile, to have, Kendrick, who hasn't put out an album in what, like 7 years? Like, honestly, about that long. Have him and Drake go at it just to get, some entertainment value out of the two of them while giving Diddy cover. Meanwhile, neither one of them, of the two, I would think that Kendrick would actually be, because he is more conscious, he is a little better in terms of speaking to social issues a little bit, especially when it came like around the BLM era.
He's much more isolated himself. right? Like,
right.
Whereas Drake has done the parties, done the Diddy stuff, been over there, connected to a ton of people. I mean, I think that's part of the thing with this is that the reason why it's so distracting is because they are talking about some real stuff in this piece, but it's all ancillary to the actual, it's like, it's not as important as other stuff, but it's like,
right.
It's stuff that's been in the zeitgeist recently, especially with the Diddy stuff, with Epstein stuff, with whatever, that essentially they're putting all that on Drake as well, but whatever, I think there's more important stuff, which you're bringing up here.
Right. So again, like you can, and I said it earlier, I gotta give Macklemore some credit here. Like, and I'm gonna say this again because we've had this conversation regarding Oliver Anthony. Is Macklemore going to leave a movement? Absolutely not. And for all intents and purposes, he shouldn't lead the movement, Macklemore. Yeah. But like, if you want to participate in terms of offering your art towards the cause, sure. Yeah. But ultimately, allow the people on the ground to do the work. Allow the college students to do the work right now. Hopefully, and like it's graduation season. Folks are graduating. The protests are still ongoing. I can imagine over the summer it's probably going to get worse, especially coming up on the conventions over the summer. I'm sure a lot of these protests are going to be more elevated depending how things in Rafah/Gaza go over the next few weeks. But for those of you who are kind of like, oh, Macklemore doesn't have a right to talk about this or rap about this, all these college students don't know what they're talking about, or they're pro-Hamas terrorists or whatever else you want to say to smear them. Let's listen to the woman, the mom of whose child was martyred, who Hamilton Hall was renamed after, and who Macklemore decided to, write this song in memory of. Let's hear from Hind Jahab's mom and what she thinks regarding the college protests. And she's speaking in Arabic, so we'll have to
read the things for people.
We'll have to read it for our friends who are just listening.
Cool.
So ever since Hind was born, the simplest occasion had to be celebrated. I'm burning on the inside, wishing that my daughter was with me, so I can celebrate her birthday. A woman saw me and asked, "Are you the mother of Hind Jahab?" I answered her, yes. She told me that your daughter had a hall named after her at Columbia. To be quite honest, I started crying because I wanted all of these movements and support to come while Hind was still alive and not after. But I was still happy about it, that there's a possibility that Hind's cause could move and mobilize people in this world. That there's a possibility that Hind could be the spark that creates change for the Palestinian cause. The night of Hind's incident, it was a very, very harsh night. Fire belts everywhere, to the extent that a tower next to us collapsed. Do you realize how intense things were? Fire and shrapnel everywhere in the house where I was residing. It was extremely terrifying. I told her to come to my embrace. She immediately closed her eyes and fell asleep. Despite it being a very harsh night, she quickly fell asleep. I looked into her eyes and her face. I told her, "Your eyelashes are so beautiful. Now never let these eyelashes leave me alone, dear." Never deprive me from seeing these beautiful cheeks. Your hair is so beautiful, dear. Hamad, I only want to stay alive so I can see you grow up into a young woman. I am very happy to be frank for what they're doing in many universities. But I hope that these protests do not stop until there is an actual permanent ceasefire in Gaza. We do not want this 6-week truce. Imagine that after 6 weeks, you'll still have to go back to a war once again. That is very difficult. We want a permanent ceasefire for life. We are tired. My message to the whole world: wake up. Hind is not the only one. It's not Palestine's first martyr. We have more than 15,000 martyrs who are children. Wake up now. Why are others like him still going through this? Why don't you really wake up? Not because of him, but because of the other children like him.
Powerful stuff. But
so yeah, hate Macklemore all you want, but that's the person that you should be listening to. That's the person that actually should be going viral right now, quite honestly. So, but you know what? You know, again, props to Macklemore for giving people a lane to actually speak on this without fear. And yeah, if he's doing it for clout, fine. You know, but he shouldn't, but he's not the face of the movement. Hind is. You know, the Palestinians who are dying should be. So, you know, so make that, so if you have a problem with what Macklemore is doing, make that point. You know, this is not about him. You know, this is about the Palestinians who are dying and are continuing to die given this oncoming assault, which we're going to talk about in the next segment.
Yeah.
But anyway, he kind of ending on that kind of note, but
I know, right?
If you want to support us, if you want to support us and what we're doing at INN, free to support us on Ko-fi at the link below, or you can use your QR code to scan with your phone and give a donation to us that way. Please like, share, and subscribe to us. We really would appreciate it, just so we can beat the algorithm, since the algorithm hates us and suppresses us to high heaven. So please leave a like, subscribe, and make sure to leave a comment. We do read your comments, especially since we have a small community that is very easy to. We do appreciate that, and we do appreciate your words of support. And you know, and actually, I do want to say this: Reef and I are thinking of, you know, creating a music show where we're able to talk more about artists that do not get a lot of play, that we want to kind of highlight. So let us know in the chat or in the comments if that's if that's a show that you would like to see. Will have to be a Rumble exclusive show, given copyright on YouTube, if we want to play their music. But also, which artists do you think are really revolutionary minded that you want us to highlight and, you know, talk about on this potential show? We don't know when we want to do it, but we are kind of talking through this. It's something also that we want to possibly have Jesse, you know, be a part of as well. But yeah, let us know if that's something you'd like to see, and what artists you think should be highlighted on the show once we get it up and running.
Yep. Animator's over at the Rockfin, holding it down, working late, but listening. Indy's over on Rumble, being not a lizard person, saying boo, boo, boo this man. But yeah, it is terrifying looking on Rumble. Rumble needs to fix the stuff. Like, it's all frozen and weird and fractal looking. Very odd. But anyway.
So hiding in the chat saying that we should
Low-key.
feature low-key. Yeah, we should. Obviously.
Yeah.
The Clash. If you heard.
Yeah, they're old school with
them.
that. Yeah, that's like my mom's shit back in the day. That's like old school punk stuff. Tons of punk stuff that we could, Anarchy in the UK, that kind of stuff. But yeah. And because I just gotta think.
Yo, there was a lot. You sent me a list. You sent a ton of Black hip hop and R&B artists a while back that are not known at all or not known in this country in certain cases that have actually used their platform to talk about a lot of these social issues too. I said Roger Waters, obviously, yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it sucks that like the true artists that actually are more socially justice minded are not getting any airplay, which makes a lot will make sense given our capitalist, society. But it does suck. But even for like someone like Jesse, who works very hard, and Jesse would say he doesn't do it, for the recognition. He does it purely out of him being moved and using his art.
If he didn't, he'd explode. I feel like it's one of those,
right? But at the same time, it's like it's even in our space. It's a shame, and I know shout out to Kit and Do Dissonance for using their platforms to highlight his work, but it's kind of a shame that even in our space, he's not elevated as much as he probably should be, especially given how talented he is.
Heidi in the chat. Oh, I know Palestinian musicians like MC Abdul. There's a few of them out there still doing it. I hope MC Abdul's still around. I hope, like that's the thing happening there, right? See musicians just not exist anymore. So, speaking of not existing, we brought this.
Yeah.
So
So I mean, you guys are smart and you guys watch the news. We knew that this was going to be something that was going to happen relatively soon. But as of right now, Israel is beginning their invasion / assault on Rafah. Rafah is basically the last, how can I say this? Refugee zone, basically would say, in Gaza.
Pushed everyone to.
That Palestinians are seeking refuge right now. And that's the only place right now that is actually I wouldn't say inhabitable, but that's where all the Palestinians that are still alive have basically ended up. And Israel is now doing an assault on them in the name of trying to destroy Hamas, quote unquote. So we have this article from Common Dreams. This is written by Jessica Corbett, who writes, War crimes, IDF strikes Rafah after Hamas agrees to ceasefire. Why? Asked Israeli lawmaker Ofer Kassif. Because killing Palestinians is more important for the Israeli government than saving Israelis. So Jessica continues. Israel yesterday launched long-awaited strikes on Rafah in the southern Gaza Strip, despite Hamas publicly confirming it agreed to a ceasefire and hostage release proposal from Egyptian and Qatari mediators. Not the first time that they agreed to something.
Mm-hmm.
God knows how many times they've agreed to something, and basically Israel is just like, fuck that shit. So, but I digress. The IDF said on social media that the IDF is currently conducting targeted strikes, no, they're not, against Hamas terror targets in eastern Rafah, the city to which over 1 million Palestinians have fled since October 7th, when Israel launched a retaliatory war that has already killed at least 34,735 people in Gaza and wounded another 78,108. Earlier yet on Monday, the IDF had dropped leaflets directing residents and refugees in that part of Rafah to relocate to a strip alongside Gaza's coast, ignoring warnings from the international community and humanitarian groups that full-spread Israeli attack on the crowded city would further endanger civilians and relief efforts. It is obvious Netanyahu wants this genocidal war to continue indefinitely so that he can remain in power. In addition to sparking outrage around the world, the Israeli government's Rafah attack and rejection of the Hamas-backed proposal was met with criticism from people across Israel. The Associated Press reported that thousands of Israelis rallied around the country Monday night, calling for an immediate deal to release the hostages still held in the Gaza Strip. Again, and shout out to Savvy for making this point, like, if the hostages are there in Gaza, right, what benefit is it for you to drop bombs indiscriminately where you can possibly target the hostages as well? Like, we're already seeing Palestinians being unearthed, from makeshift graves at Al-Shifa Hospital and then in other places, I'm fairly certain now. Another story that we talked about 2 weeks ago, I believe now. Who's not to say there's not going to be any Israeli, bodies within those Palestinian bodies at some point. But of course, I'm sure that, Israelis will kind of say, oh, that was Hamas who did that. But who's to say, again, that wouldn't be the cause of the IDF? I mean, the IDF has already killed 3 hostages, who were waving a white flag, like several months ago, and they were killed anyway. So, so they're being indiscriminate in terms of who they're targeting, and especially with the AI Lavender that as well. It's just really basically anything that moves, shoot. So, yeah, it doesn't make sense, but this just shows Israel doesn't care about the hostages, just collateral damage in terms of their larger goal. It's to ethnically cleanse the region. So, I don't know. And it surprises me that no one has ever mentioned that, but in public conversation regarding you doing this to Palestinians put the hostages at risk, given how you're doing it. So yeah, like I said, surprising that we don't hear that kind of, statement, like even in independent media, that this is what essentially Israel is doing. That this does not give any preference to the idea of, they're trying to save the hostages. If anything, you're trying to, off them as much as the Palestinians as well. So, anyway, I digress from that. Ofer Kessiv, a member of the Knesset, who was also almost expelled by fellow Israeli lawmakers earlier this year for backing South Africa's ongoing genocide case against Israel at the ICJ, again called out his own government. Israeli tanks and infantry enter East Rafah while planes bomb from above just hours after Hamas's decision to accept the hostages prisoners exchange deal. Kessiv said Monday. Why? Because killing Palestinians is more important for the Israeli government than saving Israelis, war criminals. So this is a statement from BB. The War Cabinet unanimously decided this evening, so May 6th, that was Monday, will continue its operation in Rafah in order to apply military pressure on Hamas so as to advance the release of our hostages and achieve the other objectives of the war. While the Hamas proposal is far from meeting Israel's core demands, Israel will dispatch a ranking delegation to Egypt in an effort to maximize the possibility of reaching an agreement on terms acceptable to Israel. So Reuters reported that an Israeli official said the deal was not acceptable to Israel because terms had been softened. So let's get into what the proposal was. And I found it kind of interesting, at least with a couple of places in mainstream media. So I pulled this from this was on CBS News. So there are 3 stages to the ceasefire. Each 6 weeks, permanent ceasefire, hostage swap for prisoners, displaced Gazians to return home. So that's basically what CBS said, which doesn't give a lot of information.
How much you want to bet the reason they
ahead.
didn't accept was this right here?
Right.
You know,
And there's a lot more, and there's a lot more to this because, as I said, this was kind of vague as to what this ceasefire deal implied. Thank God for Al Jazeera that gave a little bit way more information, specifics.
Yeah.
So this was pulled from Al Jazeera. Hindustan was the one that reported it in this way. First phase, 42 days. Temporary cessation of hostilities between Hamas and Israel, as well as a withdrawal from Israeli forces to the east. Israeli airplanes and drones would also stop flying over Gaza for 10 hours each day, and for 12 hours on days when captives are released. Hamas would gradually release 33 captives alive or the remains of dead. The captives will be women above the age of 50 and those who are sick or non-soldiers under the age of 19. For each civilian Israeli captive released alive, Israel would release 30 Palestinians. For every female officer released by Hamas, Israel would release 50 Palestinians. Withdrawal of IDF displaced Palestinians to be allowed to return to their homes across Gaza. Reconstruction work with Gaza must begin in the first phase, as well as the flow of aid, and that UNRWA and other relief organizations be allowed to work and help civilians. Second phase, for another 42 days, permanent end to military operations and a full Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. All the remaining Israeli men, including soldiers held captive in Gaza, to be released in return for an as yet unspecified number of Palestinian prisoners. And then the third phase, another 6 weeks, an exchange of the remains of captives and prisoners held by both sides. So you're right. I definitely think part of this was, having Palestinians return home, but then again, what homes to return to. But what Al Jazeera is saying, which I think will be kind of problematic to Israel, is the idea of having humanitarian aid help them rebuild. That's the other thing that I think would be problematic for Israel. They do not want them to rebuild. They want them to be leveled, if not gone. So, so I think that those were probably the terms I think you're right, that led Israel to say no to that.
Well, and also
the idea is
exchanging of Palestinian prisoners they don't want to do clearly.
Exactly, too.
Yeah.
Right. And we've talked about before how a lot of Palestinians who are kept in these prisons is essentially torture. So, and they're there mostly for petty shit. It's like, throw a rock at the IDF officer, you're arrested. And, petty shit that they're there for.
Right.
So anyway, back to the article. Shortly before Israel's Monday night strikes on Rafah began, Stefan Dujarric, a spokesperson for the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, said that the UN chief reiterates his press calling for both the government of Israel and the leadership of Hamas to go the extra mile needed to make an agreement come true and stop the present suffering. Expressing concern about the then imminent Israeli operation in Rafah, the spokesperson said that we are already seeing movements of people. Many of these people are in desperate humanitarian condition and have been repeatedly displaced. They search safety that there has been so many times denied. The Secretary General reminds the parties that the protection of civilians is paramount in international humanitarian law. Other UN officials have been warning of what an assault on Rafah would mean for the 1.4 million Palestinians there, among them 600,000 children. So have humanitarian and political leaders, including Bernie, who on Monday urged President Joe Biden to stand by his earlier position that attacking the city was a red line and end all offensive military aid to Israel.
I am once again asking for your financial support.
Fuck you, Bernie. Anyway, Council of American Islamic Relations National Executive Director Nahad Awad issued a similar call Monday evening, warning that the Israeli government is hell-bent on using American financial, military, and diplomatic support to ethnically cleanse what remains of Gaza and commit another massacre.
Yep.
Any thoughts? Because I have a little bit more.
No, not really. I mean, I do find it funny. We've talked about this, and you're about to bring this next paragraph, right? Where it's blaming it on Bibi, right? Making that the sole issue, one figurehead be the problem, and I'm worried about the Democrats using this, right, as a, like, come this election cycle, as a bludgeon, be like, see, we'll work with you on this. You know, Trump won't. And he just wants to, like, turn the sand to glass over there. So, you know, like, you gotta vote for us. Like, that's what I'm worried about this turning into, is that they'll try to make Biden into some, you know, he's voice of reason and been trying to fix this and yada yada. You know, like, that's the only thing I see in the future over this, you know? So we'll see how that plays out. But, you know, because, like, how hard would it be for him to just, okay, now we stop we stop sending military stuff to Israel because of Rafah, right? Even though we both know they have everything they need to wipe out the rest of Palestine without us.
Right.
So.
Right. And as I said, you know, like in the last segment, you know, Rwandans were killed in their genocide back in the 90s within 100 days. It was close to 1 million.
Yeah.
So how many lives could be slain within like half that time?
Right.
With the tech that Israel has. So
like, you want to do something, how about stop funding the Iron Dome? How about, you know,
which is not mentioned, by the way, and we're going to get to that, but that has not been mentioned, by the way.
Okay, I'll mention it then, I guess. Like how we have a similar brain sometimes. Anyway.
But speaking of Bibi, President Biden must stand up to Bibi and take concrete action to end the genocide now, Awad continued, nodding to the Israel leader's legal trouble. The prime minister faces not only a potential consequences on a global scale for what the ICJ has deemed as a plausibly genocidal war in Gaza, but also a corruption trial in his own country. It is obvious Netanyahu wants this genocidal war to continue indefinitely so that he can remain in power, avoid jail, and fulfill his racist, far-right cabinet's demands for the complete destruction of Gaza and the massacre of its people, Awad said. It is long past time for President Biden to end our nation's complicity in this turning century of genocide. So while all of this is going on, and we're in the U.S. is saying, no, don't do anything. We have to take action. We swear, don't do anything. Do not go into Rafah and all that. No, please don't.
No, don't.
Jake Johnson reports cutting off lifeline for starving Gazians. Israel seized control of Rafah crossing. This has devastating impacts for the people of Gaza who are already on the verge of famine, said the UNRWA's director of planning. What does that mean? With tanks and ground forces, the Israeli military seized control of the Gaza side of Rafah's border crossing with Egypt on Tuesday, cutting off a critical humanitarian aid route as much as the enclave's population faces imminent famine. So, no food.
Yeah.
So, we're going to starve you to death and kill you.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's happening.
Yep.
Israel's takeover of the Rafah crossing came hours after the country's military ordered more than 100,000 people in the southern Gaza city to evacuate ahead of a ground assault, which is moving forward after the right-wing Israeli government rejected a ceasefire proposal accepted by Hamas. So again, I read the entire thing of what was offered. Hamas said, sure, we'll do it.
Yep.
Israel was like, no.
No.
Because, as we said, that involves rebuilding. That involves having humanitarian organizations supporting the work. So that'll be more of an international scope thing, which, as we said, Israel does not want.
Yep.
They do not want Palestinians with the possibility of rebuilding their lives in Gaza.
Yep.
Ceasefire negotiations mediated by Egypt and Qatar are expected to continue in the coming days, which I think makes no sense. That's just all smoke and mirrors. So this is a tweet from Saul Stanford. The Rafah crossing is closed, cutting off the lifeline for 1.5 million people crammed in this tiny piece of land right at the southern end of the Gaza Strip. Hani Mahmoud reporting from Rafah. So this is probably just before Al Jazeera got cut from Israel, because that does include, journalists too are not able to be there now, at least reporting from Israel. So let's see what Hani has to say, and then we'll continue.
Right now, the Israeli military is still operating inside Rafah crossings, and we did look at videos and footage emerging from the area through official Telegram accounts belonging to the Israeli military, associated with the Israeli military, but it's showing a great deal of damage caused by tanks and armored vehicles, causing a great deal of vandalism inside the crossing. The crossing property itself. The Israeli military started at early hours of this morning under heavy cover of intense bombing by artillery, shelling by attack jets, by the quadcopters in the area at the vicinity of the crossing, as well as the attack drones at the eastern part of Rafah city. What's going on right now did not stop at just the text message or the phone calls that sent to people. People right now are forced to evacuate under heavy, intense bombing campaign at the eastern part of Rafah city. And the fact that the Israeli military right now is operating inside the crossing itself, cutting off the only lifeline right now to the people in Gaza, particularly for the 1.5 million displaced Palestinians here in Rafah city. At this point, this land crossing has been vital within the past months, allowing the humanitarian aid to go through it, even though it was at a very low level, at a very low capacity, but it provided a lifeline for people crammed in this small part of the Gaza Strip. Now, we're seeing with the Israeli military presence here, all land crossings are closed right now by Israeli military. This is sort of sealing off the Gaza Strip and cutting it off from the remaining parts of the surrounding regions.
So they're trapped, basically.
Yeah.
They're trapped, and nothing can essentially
right now
at this point get in.
Yeah,
so,
fish in a barrel, pretty much.
Basically.
Yeah.
So
right now, the Israeli military.
No, let's continue.
How do slides do that? God, they could figure that out. Nope. Hold on. There you go. Did I do it? Did I fix it? There you go.
Thank you. Two key humanitarian aid routes, the Rafah and Karim Shalom crossings, have been shut down for days as the Israeli military plows ahead with its Rafah assault in the face of international outrage. More than 600,000 children are currently living in Rafah, and aid organizations say Israel has no credible plan to protect them. Overnight, Israel launched deadly airstrikes in Rafah, describing its military operation in the overcrowded city as very precise, quote unquote. One resident told Reuters that the Israeli strikes killed his wife and children. Jens Lark, a spokesperson for the United Nations for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, told the Associated Press that Israeli authorities have denied the agency access to the Rafah crossing. A lasting shutdown on the route, Lark warned, will plunge this crisis into unprecedented levels of need, including the very real possibility of a famine. He added that Israel's military is ignoring all warnings about what this could mean for civilians and for the humanitarian operation across the Gaza Strip. Speaking to Al Jazeera on Tuesday, the Director of Planning at the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, UNRWA, the most important aid organization operating in Gaza, said the closing of the Rafah crossing is having catastrophic impacts on everyone in Gaza. Since October, this has been the main entry point of goods coming into Gaza, said Sam Rose. There's only been a trickle of goods coming in, and since Sunday, the crossing has been closed completely. And this has devastating impacts for the people of Gaza who are already on the verge of famine. No aid coming in means no aid distributed after a couple of days, Rose continued. And equally importantly, Rafah and Karim Shalom are the only entry points for fuel in Gaza. So without fuel, there's no ability for trucks to move around. There's no ability for desalination plants to operate and to provide safe water. And there's no electricity. It cuts off everything. Rafah and Karim Shalom, they're the lifeblood for the small amount of goods that have been coming into Gaza since October. So absolutely devastating.
Yeah.
Like, it just seems so sad that these people are like, this is so devastating, but like, that's it. It's just all rhetoric, but no action.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what action could they like do? You know?
I mean, they're the UN. You would think that they actually have the means to do something.
Yeah, but they only if we let them is the problem. You know? Like we have like veto power over that whole fucking thing. Like we're the only ones who said nay. Remember that motherfucker put his hand up? You know?
Yeah.
Like that's like we have veto power over that shit. So that's why. It's similar with the ICJ, right? What have you heard from them? Where's that shit been? I mean, we saw the ICC try to come after Netanyahu, right?
Netanyahu.
And what happened with that?
They're blocking, Republicans, but Democrats are going to follow suit to block it.
Well, and I think it was Baby Bush who made it to where we could physically send military force to retrieve any U.S. service personnel or whatever from the ICJ. Like, we could just go grab our boys. So, you know, that's part of this shit too. So, yeah, I mean, it's frustrating. I feel you that there's nothing happening.
Yeah.
So,
Lark of the UN Humanitarian Affairs Office said that cutting off the supply of fuel to Gaza for an extended period of time would be a very effective way for putting humanitarian operation in its grave. Volker Turk, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, said in a statement that more attacks on what is now the primary humanitarian hub in the Gaza Strip are not the answer. First and foremost, there must be a ceasefire. Humanitarian aid must be allowed to flow freely and at scale, and the hostages and those arbitrarily detained must be released at once, said Turk. Those that elect to flout international humanitarian law and international humanitarian rights law must be held to account.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it just pains me, and I've said this many times, that Rwanda, they did not declare that a genocide until after close to 1 million people are dead.
Yeah.
Namibia, we also talked about on the show, I believe, last week. You know, I forgot the number of how many Namibians were killed in that massacre, but it only took Germany, I think 2021, I believe, and this happened in the 1910s
Yeah.
that what happened there was a genocide. So this is what I'm saying to people. It's like, we do not learn or do not care about our history to understand that the powers that be are not going to call this. Biden is not going to. Well, Biden is never going to call this a genocide. He's never going. He won't have to. He's probably going to be dead and gone by the time, the idea of the West actually acknowledging that what is happening now is a genocide is going to come about. Like, Biden hasn't even apologized for the crime bill.
No.
Like, even to the point where even Hillary Clinton has acknowledged that shit was a mistake.
He doesn't even remember the crime bill. That was
probably
a long time ago.
But all
he
the
barely
same,
remembers the tapioca he had for lunch.
Right. But all the same, it's like, at least, but the idea is, like, especially given for us in the West, they're not going to say anything regarding a genocide until after the damage is done. And so these are why college students are protesting. They do not want that idea to happen. Like, the fact that there's at minimum, I'm going to say 40 plus thousand Palestinians who are dead.
So this was, this was when was this? May
today.
8th?
I just pulled that just before we went live.
Yeah.
Because this was the trending story right now, just before we went live. Pulled this from CNN that says Biden says he will stop sending bombs and artillery shells to Israel if it launches major invasion on Rafah. But as you said earlier,
and now what?
They already have the weapons they need.
Yeah.
So this is redundant. Like, there's no point of saying stop when you've given them aid. And again, as you mentioned, Iron Dome is still a thing. They haven't even mentioned that. But shout out to oh boy, what? Why the slide took so long? There we go. So I pulled this from Instagram from Khalid Beydan. I saw this on one of my friends' stories and I pulled it, which I think exemplifies this idea very well. The U.S. opposes the invasion of Rafah. Funny. Biden facilitated and fueled every single step towards its realization. $40 billion, 40,000 deaths plus, and free vetoes say otherwise.
Yep.
So, and it's so funny that people were celebrating the idea of, like, finally, at least Biden is doing something. Yay! Not thinking of the fact that, like, Israel's good.
Right.
And even if they say, if the U.S. is like, we're not going to give you any weapons, is that going to stop Israel from stopping their onslaught anyway? No. So, it's just a whole lot of bullshit.
You're just going to get...
I am altering the deal. Pray I don't alter it any further.
Like, that's all you're going to get. Like, that's what it seems like every step of the way. We pretty much, I say we, governmentally, we've asked them, hey, please keep a lid on your annihilation and genocide. Like, only make it like a little bit of a genocide. And they're like, no, we gotta be as evil as possible. So,
right.
But anyway, yeah, just craziness all around. I'm sure this won't be the last Palestinian city that they're going to try to massacre, but just a par for the course. So
yeah, I forgot to put it in, but I put out a tweet on Monday. We pulled it from Donahue's show. You gave me that clip where that woman said, Holocaust quite simply is the greatest atrocity on film.
Yeah,
and she mentioned how black atrocities were not. And you're going to go into this later with Al Jazeera, but this is going to be another genocide that's going to go down in more or less silence.
Yep.
Because of how the media is promoting, like, not talking about this in the right way. and
Right.
how everything related to Palestine, especially with TikTok in particular, is being censored or pulled the plug on so that people cannot share anything on what's happening down there. And meanwhile, like, there are children there who are suffering.
Yep.
Just
Ugh,
sucks.
it really does. So, and the places that talk about it get demonetized frequently, as I'm sure you know. So go to codashv.com/Indie News Network. You want to do the super chats. You can't do that on the platform you're watching. Scan the QR code on your screen, or put !donate if you're in the chat live with us. If you can't do that, no, go away. You can like and subscribe, share and comment. You know the drill by now. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. Send this to your friends. Tell them to subscribe. And then they tell 2 friends. And then they tell 2 friends. And then they tell 2 friends. So, you can also go to Rockfin and Rumble. If you don't want to be on YouTube, you can find some friends over there. I'll link that for people in the chat if they would like to go there. But yeah, we'll check on those. And Amares, you need rebar to turn sand to glass, by the way. I mean, not necessarily. A big old couple of split atoms should do the thing just fine. And Amares, just saying. Or lightning does it, by the way. I have one of those somewhere. I should pull that out for people to see. Have you ever seen that, Colin? After lightning hits sand, makes this big glass, like lightning shaped thing. Kind of fun, neat. I forget what they're called. Someone will tell me what those are called. Yeah. I mean, what happens when you get like 4,000 million kilojoules of energy in the sand? Funky stuff happens. How courts be doing. But anyway, so, we've been having this on the back burner, this story, for a minute. And I figured it was time, because a few of our brothers and sisters made some unusual statements, especially after Macklemore's song came out. So I figured we'd pull both these together. So, we have Anya here. Macklemore claims AIPAC and Kufi are part of a system of white supremacy. First of all, bro, you're white. Second of all, those groups don't exist to promote white supremacy. Israel is not based on white supremacy. It's based on Zionism. Anya, I don't know if you know, but those are kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
So
it's in it's in umbrella. It's in the spectrum.
Well, I think her point. I think her point was that they hate more than just, like, they hate other white people. And it's like, I hate to tell you, but as a person who got those KKK flyers, those white supremacists, they hate other white people too. Like that's how this works.
Don't forget, like KKK, they were Protestants. They hated Catholics.
Yes.
So,
and Irish and Italians and Jews and,
and Slavs. And basically anyone who is not,
anyone who wasn't
basically
Southern
anyone who
white
is not
Baptist.
Western European.
Yeah.
More or less.
Yeah.
If you weren't British or French, they hated your guts. So,
and same thing with the Zionists, seeing how most of them are Europeans to begin with, especially now. So we weren't the only ones saying this kind of stuff, right? But she continues, the Zionists love that pro-Palestinian students think the problem is white supremacy and that Chad frat boys feel like everyone believes they are the problem. In the meantime, Zionists squander the future of both these student groups and keep us all divided. I get where you're going. Just unnecessary, Anya, I feel like.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't care what those other people think of my white supremacy labeling on white supremacy. Like, the optics.
What do you say?
Don't matter in that regard.
What do you say at the end of our show every week?
Labels are bad. Because they can be co-opted and misinterpreted and whatever. Like, I feel you. Trust me, Anya, I feel you. But, Jay Buffont, we want more white people to call out white supremacy. That's how you help change the system. Also, Zionism is part of white supremacy. Need we remind you of how Zionists treat Ethiopian Jews? This guy, Collin, says, Max, come get your girl. Zionism is a branch of white supremacy. Kimber Maddox, Zionism is a white supremacist ideology. There's a reason so many non-Jewish white Americans support it. Regardless, I'm curious why you believe white people can't call out white supremacy. That makes absolutely no sense.
No sense. But that's the thing, and that's why I was sharing with you before we went live. This whole thread, because she went in all through today on this subject. This was all stemmed from Macklemore, of all things.
And I'm one to remember. I want to remember, Collin, when the Gray Zone was praising the likes of Oliver Anthony for weeks. I got blocked by a guy because of it. You know, so where's he being white? Where's Roger Waters being white supporting Macklemore on this? How much money he give the Gray Zone? I mean, if we're going to talk, like, he's speaking about Palestine too, calling it white supremacist. Where's your ire over that?
Right.
Like,
and even within another, but even within another thing, Anya was like, "Oh, well, we need white people." I think she might have saw JB Street and tried to
backpedal a little,
it back a bit, possibly. Like, but she was like, "Oh, we need white people to call out Zionism." Then why are you fucking around on Macklemore for? Like, I just feel that there was a lot more to what she might have been thinking in her head before she tweeted it out. Like,
friend of the show, Nico House. I don't know enough about Kufi, but I know enough about AIPAC to know their existence has zero to do with protecting African black Jews, even though they pay off a few black politicians. So he's definitely onto something that they're here to uplift and promote the superiority of a specific type of Zionist. There's race is absolutely part and the beginning of this problem. So she replies to Nico. Yes, well, this is chicken and egg, right? Is it class? Is it racism? It's kind of the same thing all the time. So she writes, those are two U.S. orgs that exist to influence the U.S. on behalf of Israel and Zionism. Bill Ackman is a Zionist donor, not a white supremacist donor. I would argue you could claim that, though, can't you? You know, Zionist privilege does not extend to all whites, and not all white people can make ayah. And Zionists have non-Zionist white Christians, hate non-Zionist white Christians. And yes, the Europeans who founded Israel don't view black Jews as equal, because they invented a narrative that places all of us, black, brown, or white, below them. Just like any other white supremacist group, Anya. They all do that.
Right.
Like, it's us versus them mentality. That's how it starts. So, let's go back, Collin. Let's take it back. When was this published in Consortium News? Originally published November 28th of 2012.
The wrong damn date. Yeah.
That's how far it goes back. Okay, they republished this like a couple weeks ago, right?
A month, right.
So this is by Lawrence Davidson, who writes Origins of Israel's Anti-Arab Racism. The anti-Arab racism that pervades modern Israel can be traced back to attitudes of old European imperialism, argued Lawrence Davidson in 2012, in this prescient forecast of today's Israeli genocide. Okay? So, we're going to start here. We're going to go way back to the middle of the 19th century. The multi-ethnic empire was on its way out as the dominant political paradigm in Europe, replacing it with the nation-state, a political form which allowed the concentration of ethnic groups within their own political borders. This, in turn, formed cultural and racial incubators for an us superior versus them inferior nationalism that would underpin most of the West's future wars. Many of these nation-states were also imperial powers expanding across the globe, and of course, their state-based chauvinistic outlook went with them. Do I hear Manifest Destiny in the chat? Anyone?
Yes.
And what it did to the native populations here?
Right.
And I don't know, Africa, India, any of those things, right? So again, the multi-ethnic empire was on its way out, right? We wanted Europeans controlling things, right? So this guy, Hungarian Theodor Herzl, you heard of this guy?
Well, yes, we have.
With his lovely beard and mustache. So Zionism was born in the milieu of nationalism and imperialism, both of which left an incredible mark on the character and ambitions of the Israeli state. The conviction of none other than Theodor Herzl, modern Zionism's founding father, was that the centuries of anti-Semitism were proof positive that Europe's Jews could not be assimilated into mainstream Western society. They could not only be safe if they possessed a nation state of their own, right? That was his...
They could always be safe.
Yes, right. So this was in turn when we were hearing that members of his own Hungarian people that they were saying the Palestinians should go, the Jews should go to Palestine. Get out, pretty much, right?
Well,
as well as
out.
Nazis also said the same thing.
Right.
So this conversation also reflected the European imperial sentiments of the day. It's like the Nazis. They also didn't like other white people. I don't know if you remember, like it wasn't just, Jews they hated.
Right. They hated Slavs, I believe. They hated
Poles,
Gypsies,
Russians for sure.
Poles.
So yeah. This conviction also reflected the European imperial sentiments of the day. The founders of modern Zionism were both Jews and Europeans, and as such had acquired the West's cultural sense of superiority in relation to non-Europeans. The sense of superiority would play an important role when a deal, the Balfour Declaration, was struck in 1917 between the World Zionist Org and the British government. The deal stipulated that in exchange for Zionist support for the British war effort, World War I was in progress, the British would, assuming victory, help create a Jewish national home in Palestine. There was no oversight.
We talked about this. Right. Sorry. We talked about this. That's the reason because the Zionists had the money.
Yes.
And the British needed to ensure that they won the war because their funding was running out. So that was what was done in exchange. You fund us to make sure we win this, and we'll give you the land that you want.
Right. So in Palestine, it was no oversight that neither side in this bargain gave much thought to the Palestinians' native population. Years later, beginning in 1945, at the end of World War II, the British were forced to officially give up their imperial point of view. They came out of the war with a population burdened by extraordinary high war taxes. Retaining the empire would keep those taxes high, and so the British voter elected politicians who would transform the empire into a commonwealth, granting independence to just about all Britain's overseas territories. One of those territories was what? Palestine. It is interesting to note that in other European colonies where large numbers of Europeans resided, the era following World War II saw their eventual evacuation as power shifted over to the natives. Kenya and Algeria are examples which show that this process was hard and bloody, but it happened. And when it did happen, the official imperial mindset was defeated. That does not mean that all Europeans saw the light and ceased to be racist, but their government eventually saw the necessity to stop acting that way. Unfortunately, in the case of Palestine, the process of decolonization never occurred. In this case, the European colonists did not want the imperial mother country to stay and protect them. They wanted them out so they could set up shop of their own. They got their chance after the British evacuated in 1947. Soon thereafter, the Zionists began executing a prepared plan to conquer the Holy Land and chase away or subjugate the native population. And what of the imperial point of view, which saw the European as superior and the native as inferior? This became institutionalized in the practices of the new Israeli state. That made Israel one of the very few, the other being apartheid South Africa, self-identified Western nation states to continue to implement old-style imperial policies. They discriminated against the Palestinian population in every way imaginable, pushed them into enclosed areas of concentration, and sought to control their lives in great detail. One wants to know what this meant for the evolving character of Israel's citizenry, who now would live out the colonial drama as an imperial power in their own right. One might take a look at the book by Sven Lindqvist entitled Exterminate All the Brutes, New Press, 1996. This work convincingly shows that lording it over, often resisting native peoples, debasing and humiliating them, regularly killing or otherwise punishing them when they protest, leads the colonials to develop genocidal yearnings. There is evidence that the Zionists who created and now sustain Israel suffer from this process. For a long time, Israeli government officials tried genocide via a thought experiment. They went about asserting that the Palestinians did not exist. The most famous case of this was Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir, who on June 15, 1969, claimed that there were no such thing as Palestinians. They do not exist. One of the reasons she gave for this option was that the Arabs of Palestine never had their own nation state, which is just wrong. Others took a different approach by denying not so much the existence of Palestinians, but rather their humanity. At various times and in various contexts, usually in response to acts of resistance against occupation, Israeli leaders have referred to the Palestinians as beasts walking on two legs. That's Menachem Begin, right? Grasshoppers, Yitzhak Shamir, crocodiles, Ehud Barak, and cockroaches, Rafael Aitan. We've heard these very many times in regards to these things. So, of course, these sentiments were not confined to the Israeli leadership. They soon pervaded most of the Zionist population because the old imperial superiority propaganda had become a core element of their base education. The Israelis have taught their children the important point of view, augmented it with biased media reporting. Yes. What did I say? Hopefully not impartial. The imperial point of view, augmented it with biased media reporting, labeled the inevitable resistance offered by the Palestinians as anti-Semitism, and took it as proof of the need to suppress and control the population of others. And we've talked about what they teach their children on this show before. What do we call that segment? Do you remember? I forget. I brought it. But anyway, it's somewhere on the channel. So, and from the Zionist standpoint, this entire process has worked.
It's the education one. One of the education ones. I forget. I know it's education.
Something like that, right? So, this entire process has worked remarkably well. Today, all but a handful of Israeli Jews dislike and fear the people they conquered and displaced. They wish they would go away, and when the resistance was just a bit too much to bear, they are now quite willing to see them put out of the way. Thus, during the latest, this was in 2012, round of resistance rocket fire from Gaza and the vengeful killing that came from the Israeli side, we heard the following.
But Reef.
I know, October 7th, I know.
I thought everything started to October 7th.
October 7th.
Of last year.
Yeah, last year. It was the only time. So again, 2012, right? They said, we must blow Gaza back to the Middle Ages, destroying all the infrastructure, including roads and water. Collin, what are they doing now?
Just that.
Yeah. So they continued, there should be no electricity in Gaza, no gasoline or moving vehicles, nothing. We need to flatten entire neighborhoods, flatten all of Gaza. Journalist Jalad Sharon in the Jerusalem Post.
I mean, it's just as if they manifested everything that they spoke into existence that is happening right now.
Yeah. So members of the Knesset, there are no innocents in Gaza. Mow them down. Kill the Gazans without thought or mercy. Again, 2012. Gaza should be bombed so hard the population has to flee to Egypt. Israel Katz, present Minister of Transportation. Gaza should be wiped clean with bombs. Avi Ditcher, present Minister of Home Front Defense. Israel soldiers must learn from the Syrians how to slaughter the enemy. Prominent Israeli Rabbi Yaakov Yosef. Finally, there were the numerous spontaneous demonstrations of ordinary Israeli citizens, both in the north and south of the country, where it could be heard chants and shouts such as, "They don't deserve to live, they need to die, may your children die, kick out all the Arabs."
Honestly, Reef, that should be a short.
Yeah.
All of that part right there should be a short because it makes it, because it gives credence to what people have been saying regarding how Palestinians have been viewed this whole time, that people are either in denial or just plain straight up lying about. But this is people within government is saying this, you know? And so, like, kind of going back to Anya's thing, like, because the argument that I was making with her is that Zionism is not necessarily a religious ideology per se. Like, Herschel was not, he was an atheist according to many things. So it's like, you can argue, and definitely back then, it was more political. It was based on imperialism and capital. Like, Zionists had the money, they wanted had the money and wanted to retake Palestine over, but they used Judaism as a means to do that. So, you know, so for me, it's just like, I have a hard time even saying Jewish supremacy in a sense, because it gives the idea, seemingly, that all Jews think this way, which we know is definitely not the case. But it does fall in line in what can be considered under white supremacy in terms of, you know, that shield that you can have. Like, again, you know, but generally for European Jews, you don't have to say you're Jewish, right? Like, you don't necessarily have to bend your identity based on the fact that you're Jewish unless you say so. Like, I don't have that. I don't have that shield. You know, it's very obvious what I am. And from that, I'm already identified as inferior. Like, Jews in this day and age don't have to go through that necessarily, unless they have more melanin. And even then, that's not even a guarantee for them, you know, even if they're Jewish. So it's the willingness to play ball with the systematic institution that is white supremacy. That is the problem. That's the issue that I had with Anya calling it Jewish supremacy. So, it is that, but it's to a larger degree within that scope, within that spectrum of using that institution as a means to get what you want. It's just a matter of them using the religion to hijack it in a way that to justify their moves.
You know about taxonomy? You've done some, right? The classification of living things, right? You know, you got your order, phylum, species, all that stuff, right? So my mother's a biologist, right? Has been doing this in the field for a long time. There are two, right, groups in taxonomy: lumpers and separators, right? So, like, let's say you find a new species of shrimp, right? Do you lump it in with a previous species, right? Or do you separate it as a new species? That was, I think, what Anya was dealing with. Was like, do I separate this as something separate? Or do I lump it in with white supremacy, even though that's what it is? Like, or do I try to separate it because it is different? Like, I get the argument in your head, just not needed, you know?
But as you said, it's not so different compared to Nazism, Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah.
Like, it's the idea of superiority. And in this case, over people of color to justify, you know, them overtaking you because they essentially think of you as a less than. So it's that European mindset of literally it kind of along the lines of Rene Descartes, I think therefore I am type deal.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like my presence as this white person is more significant than yours.
Yeah.
As a person of color. So yeah, I mean, I get what she was trying to do.
Yeah.
But it kind of fell flat. But again, it kind of fell flat as to the reason why.
Right. Like, I get you feeling why you feel like that's dismissive. And I also, Anya, see you underneath people saying that burning the American flag is dismissive. Yes, it is. And do you know why? Because there's a lot of us who are anti-American at this point. We do not like what our country is doing. Like, we just don't. We live here. It doesn't mean we are completely patriotic, whatever. And if anyone wants to argue with me on it, feel free. I'll give you a long list of why you should not be happy about our country. Like, you know, that scroll's going to be pretty fucking long. So if people are out here wanting to burn the fucking flag, I get that shit. I completely understand that shit. You know, so, like, I get why you feel like optics are important, but I think the optics of dead babies is a lot more prevalent and a lot more of a problem. So, you know, like, while I get you, you know, I feel like you're tone policing and it's unnecessary. But back to this article from 2012. If it wasn't for the fact the outside world was watching, and this is just a funny paragraph because we now know better, right? If it wasn't for the fact that the outside world was watching, there can be little doubt that the famed Israeli armed forces would have been tempted to do all that these ministers, clerics, and citizens wished, which they are now doing, with us watching. Today, look in a paragraph, today the outside world is having little effect on Western government support for the ongoing genocide. After Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu agreed to a ceasefire in 2012, you're wondering why he didn't do one now, right? So a group of Israeli soldiers showed their frustration by using their bodies to spell out in Hebrew the words "Bibi loser." Right? It was a pre-arranged photo op, and the picture can now easily be found on the web. What seems to really irk the Israeli citizenry is not that Bibi killed and maimed too many innocent civilians, but rather that he did not kill and maim enough of them to grant Israelis safety and security. So, you know, here you go. Soldiers spell out PM is a loser. So, you know, I think that's why they're, you know, why we're pushed to blame Bibi in this, right? So, you know, and his own people will be pushed into that, and they'll blame him, especially if he votes for a ceasefire, right? So, throughout history, it has been standard operating procedure to demonize those you fight and demote to inferior status those you conquer. But as Linkovitz's work shows, there was something different about the way Europeans went about this. The deeply racist outlook that underlay modern imperialism made it particularly perverse. Now that apartheid South Africa is no more, the Israelis are the last surviving heirs to that dreadful heritage. So much for a light onto the nations that proposition has quite failed. Wherever the Israelis and their Zionist cohorts are leading us, it is not into the light, it is to someplace very, very dark. And we're now in that darkness. So, any closing thoughts before we head out? of this segment?
Well, again, I'm glad. Thank you for bringing that article, but I think it's just a reminder, just as far as where Zionism came from. Like, this is coming from the continent that, like, put my ancestors in chains, right? So it's like the idea that, these European, like, this is all kind of building upon capitalism at the end of the day. The issue with slavery, in the West is that it became a business. See, that's what I'm kind of simplifying it, but basically that's what it was. Like, people argue, like, Arabs had slaves and like people had yes, but that was more
every culture in
I
the
mentioned this on
fucking planet had them.
Every culture had, but then you can argue that was more or less of indentured servitude. That was when, like, you conquered people, like,
it was
and
war.
then you just
it was spoils of war.
Right.
Like, you took the able-bodied men that you conquered, and they then worked for you. Like,
work for you,
right?
Like,
yeah.
But
in a lot of these cases, but when then that became a business, that's when things became a problem. So,
right, like, profit, like, not for them, not for me or like my family or like, for ADOS or whatever, like, or within the diaspora. So this is but again, this is kind of like the seeds of what was Zionism stem from this idea.
Yep.
So, wherever you not like you, right. And that's what I think people should realize is that this is what Zionism is based upon. Is it based upon a lot of these ideas that essentially, like, brought Black people to the West on account of slavery, or account, as you kind of alluded to, Native Americans essentially been genocided off, in the name of manifest destiny, or like in the name of religious freedom, like for the Pilgrims or whatever. It's like what we're currently seeing now, like in Papua, was it Papua New Guinea? Like, yeah, you did a story
Still
about
ongoing.
that, I think, over a year ago.
Yep.
Still
Paradise
ongoing right
Farm.
now, which no one is even talking about that either.
Yeah.
So, but these are all based upon the ideas and, like, kind of like from the Enlightenment era within the West, in terms of basically white people feeling themselves and then just being like, I'm hot shit and I can do whatever I want and fuck everybody else. And the issue that I have with this in terms of Judaism, or basically all the Abrahamic religions at their core, if you're looking at it from a holistic, they're meant to be religions of peace. So,
well, they're
as
the
a
whole.
Jew,
By the way, Zionism in and of itself, we haven't really talked about this in general as far as how other Jews depict it in their teachings. They are not allowed to have a nation state until their Messiah shows up.
Right.
Like, but Zionism argued, no, we got to have it before then. No, your book tells you that that's not the way this works. So.
Right. But I think on a basic level, if you're talking about a religion of peace, why, but you're kind of it's like, so intertwined. Zionism at this point is somewhat intertwined with Judaism. Like, why would you want to be a part of a religion that is essentially, giving carte blanche to the massacre of thousands of children in the name of quote unquote Judaism, in the name of, which is not necessarily interpreted that way, but it can be. Like, why would you want to be a part of a religion like that if that's what essentially, like, in the leanings of a nation built around the religion? Like, that's what you want to be stood for?
You mean like
that's what
the
you want
Vatican?
To be known for?
You mean like the Vatican?
Yes.
Because it is also one of those religions. Yeah.
Same thing.
All of them. Pick one. You know,
what that's why I'm saying, like in a holistic view, but like how we, as human beings interpret that, like we're making a whole mess of it.
Yeah.
But those are the conversations that I don't think people are necessarily having.
Well, and even the fucking prominent atheists who should be on this shit, frontwards, backwards, sideways, have eaten up the propaganda on all this shit. So, that's my issue as a fucking atheist in the South. I've had plenty of these fucking battles over Christianity and its Zionism, right? Like, let alone, that was Iraq War, that was Iran, that was Afghanistan. We were having those arguments. So, like, there's a lot of inconsistencies when it comes to religion and that shit. So, that's the way I feel about it. But, yeah, I definitely wanted to bring this to cover a bit about, we probably should do a thing on Herschel himself, right? And,
yes,
it's hard to find stuff that isn't completely propaganda on that guy, but we'll look into that maybe, and the Russia's involvement with all that shit and things like that. But in the meantime, talking about these things means we get demonetized and censored and suppressed. So, if you could help us out by going to ko-fi.com/IndieNewsNetwork and giving us the $2 you would normally give to Starbucks that you're boycotting right now, that would be nice. Scan that little QR code on your screen and give us a couple of dollary dues. We appreciate that. But if you can't do that, very easy. Like, subscribe, share this with your friends. We are heavily suppressed. The more you can get this to like-minded people, the better. Leaving comments supposedly helps the algorithm, so do some of that too. Let us know what you think. But, otherwise, go to alternative platforms to find us, which you can find at indienews.network. You can subscribe to our Rockford and Rumble pages in case YouTube decides to completely boost us. You can find us there. But, anyway, before we get to our next one, I'm gonna go check Rockford and Rumble, because that's what we do here. Anna Mayer's over on the Rockfin. Word, 80% inflation on top of no raise in wages. I'd be down to burn the flag too, because it's the badge of our government who is abandoning us left and right. Yeah. I'm not going to let a dumb symbol of cloth and blood and murder be a sticking point for me. So, but yeah. Anyone over on the Rumble? Nope. Indy's still just laying it down. There's supposedly 8 people watching. If you're one of those 8 people, leave a chat. Leave us a little comment in the chat there. Let us know what you think. Let us know you're not one of those Illuminatis. But yeah. All right. You ready for yours?
So, hold on. So, Dr. Nick in the chat said, Grand Theft World Podcast has done deep dives regarding Herschel. Have you heard of them?
I've not, but I'll look into it.
Look into that. Mastermind Hours said, I'm waiting for a deep dive on the Ben Gurion Canal. I told him in chat we already did.
Already did that. Yeah, go back.
We already did. Check. Go back to our playlist. I think it is called the Ben Gurion Canal. Go look it up. Yeah, he said, Collin, I must have missed it, but most people miss the fact that the canal is one of the reasons Israel wants. Yep. We talked about that extensively. Go in our playlist. I believe it's called the Ben Gurion Canal. Check that out. That's actually probably one of my favorite segments we did, actually.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot. But yeah, it's like, again, kind of capitalism, baby.
Yeah. If only
that's
the
all
media,
what it is about.
If only the media, like, would talked about some of this stuff, If only they did that. Which brings us to your story.
This brings us to a story. So, fun fact, May 4th is known as Star Wars Day in pop culture. But it's also known as World Press Freedom Day.
Yep.
So
you like how they cover that? You like how they cover that up, huh? World Press Freedom Day is now Star Wars Day. You know, nothing like a fucking cash grabbing capitalist fucking movie that even Mel Brooks made fun of the fact that that's what was, you know, selling toys to children.
So we're going to look at journalist Jonathan Cook, who is based in the UK. He went to a protest in Bristol, where he did a speech there, and he spoke. So this segment is based upon the speech that he just, he basically used his speech as a Substack article. So shout out to Indy, who loves Substack, trying to get enough independent writers on
coming to
in the space
Substack newsletter near you.
Thank you. I was waiting for that. So so I felt like it was just giving especially an independent journalist a platform and highlighting his work. But before we do that, let's take a look at this protest in Bristol. I believe this was done I'm not sure if it was done this past weekend. It could have been, but I'm not entirely sure. But you will see Jonathan Cook in this. So we're gonna talk about the media bias regarding the Gaza protests, and then we'll get into his article itself. So we no. Oh.
Playing this?
Yeah, you can play the whole thing.
This march is themed around the media bias in the coverage of what's happening in Gaza right now, the genocide in Gaza right now. But it's also about the murder of the journalists on the ground and everything that's being done to obstruct the truth, which is really quite simple. What we have here is a colonizing power enacting oppression in just another way on the people it's trying to ethnic cleanse from the land that is natively theirs. So that's what we're protesting today, and it's so important because what the media reports is so much more than just some words. They have so much power in making us complacent, power in making us accept that some humans are less deserving of life than others, that this is self-defense or necessary, and in obscuring the context that you need in order to understand what's happening in Gaza right now.
Western media is enabling genocide by the way they're framing the conflict in Palestine. This is a genocide, and we're not allowed to even say the word genocide. The Israeli media, the Israeli representatives can come out and say whatever they want, and they're left unchallenged. And as soon as somebody from the Palestinian side comes out and talks about what's going on, they're questioned, they're interrogated, they're put on trial, and it's absolutely outrageous what's going on. You know, there was a survey done a few decades ago, that people who saw the BBC coverage of the conflict in Palestine, they believed the Palestinians were occupying Israel. That is just shocking. So here we are today, fantastic turnout, and people are talking about how they are aware of the bias and has to stop.
The problem with the British media is it's not giving us, it's omitting huge amounts of information about what's going on. It's refusing to describe what's happening as a genocide, and it clearly is, characterised that way. It's applying double standards compared even to the recent invasion of Ukraine, where it was clear that the BBC was quite prepared to take a stand on what it saw as war crimes and atrocities, and yet when Israel is doing far worse things in Gaza, it refuses to identify those things using the same kind of language. So it's burying the story. And it's also focusing on us as activists who are trying to highlight what's going on, to bring the message, to make the genocide visible. What you can see is the reluctance to report it. So, for instance, the mass graves in Khan Yunis and that are being discovered actually across Gaza as the Israeli army has withdrawn from certain areas. Is the media giving this any kind of centre stage, or they took days and days even to mention it, and it was mentioned briefly and then disappeared? So you can't say it's not reported. I think that's important for the Western media, not to feel that they can be pointed out that they're just totally failing to report things. What they tend to do is just minimise it or shove it to the margins or report on it in the least way they can, or equivocate about it or deflect from it, so it becomes retaliation. Even though Israel can't retaliate against Palestinians, they've been occupying them for decades and decades.
Lovely.
Right. So, so Jonathan shared a little bit of the media bias that is had. I mean, we've talked about it extensively on this show. I know you and Indy have talked about it on How We Missed That as well.
Yeah.
So let's get into his article. Like I said, he just took his speech and transcribed it into this.
Okay.
So he writes, "Why the media have failed Gaza. The media's job is to create the impression of uncertainty, doubt, and confusion. Our job is to explode that lie, denying them and the political class they protect an alibi." So Jonathan writes, and yeah, Indy mentioned that he is an India Media Award honoree 2 weeks ago. Thank you. So yesterday, May 4th, was World Press Freedom Day, and it is fitting we mark it by highlighting two things. First, we should honor the brave journalists of Gaza who have paid a horrifying price for making the Palestinian experience of genocide visible to Western audiences over the past 7 months. Israel has killed a tenth of their number, some 100 journalists, as it tries to prevent the truth of its atrocities from getting out. Israel has been the most deadly eruption of violence against journalists ever recorded. Second, we must shame the Western media, not least the BBC, who have so utterly betrayed their Palestinian colleagues by failing to properly report the destruction of Gaza or name it as a genocide. The BBC aired only the briefest coverage of South Africa's devastating case against Israel at the ICJ in January, a case so powerful the court has put Israel on trial for genocide, a fact you would barely know from the BBC's reporting. By contrast, the corporation cleared the schedules to present in full Israel's hollow legal response. The BBC's double standards are all the more glaring if how it reported Ukraine, also invaded by a hostile army, Russia's. Only 2 years ago, the BBC dedicated its main news headlines to Kyiv's citizens mass-producing Molotov cocktails, which was to great Russian soldiers closing in on their city. BBC Middle East editor Jeremy Bowen felt emboldened to post, apparently approvingly, a diagram showing weak points where the improvised explosives would do the most damage to Russian tanks and the soldiers inside. 2 years later, in its coverage of Israel's assault on Gaza, the same BBC has performed a 180-degree turn. It is quite impossible to imagine Bowen or any other British journalist posting instructions of how Palestinians might burn alive Israeli soldiers in their tanks, even though those soldiers, unlike Russia's, have been occupying and stealing Palestinian lands for decades, not 2 years. Israeli soldiers, unlike Russian soldiers, are now actively enforcing a genocidal policy of starvation. But the double standards of establishment media like the BBC aren't directed only towards the peaceful Gaza. They're directed at us, the public, too. The same media that celebrated families taking in Ukraine refugees has willingly conspired in the smearing of those whose only crime is that they wish to stop the slaughter of 15,000 plus Palestinian children in Gaza. There is apparently nothing heroic about opposing Israel's genocide, even if opposing Russia's invasion is still treated as a badge of honor.
Mm-hmm.
The media gives politicians a free pass to vilify as an anti-Semite anyone outraged that UK weapons are being used to help kill, maim, and orphan many, many tens of thousands of Palestinian children. That accusation assumes that every Jew supports the slaughter and erases all those Jews standing alongside us today at this protest. In the US, police forces are beating and arresting students who have peacefully called on their universities to stop investing in the arming of Israel's genocide. When the police pulled back at UCLA, it was only to allow pro-Israel thugs to assault the students, again, many of them Jews. A clear war is being waged against the right to protest against a genocide, and in tandem, the media has declared war on the English language. The roles of aggressor and victim have been reversed. The BBC accused the students encamped on university grounds of clashing with pro-Israel groups that invaded the campus to violently attack them. What explains these glaring inconsistencies, this gigantic failure by a media that's supposed to act as a watchdog on the abuse of power? Part of the answer is old-school racism. Ukrainians look like us, as some reporters let slip, and therefore deserve our solidarity. Palestinians, it seems, do not. But there is another more important answer. The establishment media isn't really a watchdog on the abuse of power. It never was. It is a narrative factory there to create stories that make those abuses of power possible. State and billion-owned media achieve this goal through various sleights of hand. First, they omit stories that might disrupt the core narrative. The media script is a simple one. What the West and its allies do is always well-meant, however horrific the outcomes. And what the West does, however provocative or foolhardy, can never be cited as an explanation for what our enemies do. No cause and no effect. They, whoever we select, are simply savage. They are evil. They are out to destroy civilization. They must be stopped. Nightly for weeks, I've watched the BBC News. If it were all I relied on, I would barely know that Israel is daily bombing the refugee camps of Rafah that are supposedly a safe zone, or that Israel continues to engineer a famine and that Palestinians continue to die of hunger, or that the UK has actively assisted the creation of that famine by denying UNRWA funding, or that the protests to end the Gaza genocide, painted as terror, supporting and anti-Semitic, are backed by many, many Jews, some of them here today. And of course, I would have little idea that Israel's imprisonment and slaughter of Palestinians did not begin on October 7th with Hamas's attack. That's because the BBC continues to ignore the siege of Gaza as a context for October 7th, just as it and the rest of the media largely ignore the 17-year siege throughout the years Israel was enforcing it. If I relied on the BBC, I would not understand that what Israel is doing can neither be retaliation, not a war. You can't go to war or retaliate against a people whose territory you have been belligerently occupying and stealing for decades. And when the media can no longer admit, it distracts through strategies of deflection, misdirection, and mimicimation. So when Gaza makes the news, as it really does now, it is invariably filtered through other lenses.
Minimization.
The focus is on.
That was.
Thank you.
Yep.
The focus is on interminable negotiation, on Israel's plans for the day after, on the agonies of the hostages' families, on the fears evoked by protest chants, on where to draw the line on free speech. Anything to avoid addressing a genocide that has been carried out in broad day for 7 months. In their defense, establishment journalists tell us that they have a duty to be impartial. Their critics, they say, do not understand how news operations work. As a journalist who spent years working in major newsrooms, I can assure you this is a self-serving lie. Just this week, an interview went viral of the North Broadcasting Corporation interviewing Israeli government spokesman David Mencer. Unlike the BBC, Mencer's lies did not pass unchallenged. The Norwegian journalist spent 25 minutes unpicking his falsehoods and deceptions one by one. It was revelatory to see an Israeli spokesman claims stripped away layer by layer until he stood there naked, his lies exposed. I should have pulled that, honestly, if I could have found that. It can be done if there is a will to do it. Journalists at the BBC and the rest of the establishment media understand, however implicitly, that their job is to fail. It is to fail to investigate the genocide in Gaza. It is to fail to give voice to the powerless. It is to fail to provide context and aid understanding. It is to fail to show solidarity with their colleagues in Gaza being killed for their journalism. Rather, the BBC's role is to protect the political establishment from ever being held to account for their complicity in genocide. The establishment media's job is to create the impression of uncertainty, of doubt, of confusion, even when what is happening is crystal clear. When one day the World Court finally gets around to issuing a ruling on Israel's genocide, probably God knows how long it's going to be, our politicians and media will claim they could not have known that they were misled, that they could not clearly see because events were shrouded by the fog of war. Our job is to explode that lie to deny them an alibi. It is to keep pointing out that the information was there from the start. They knew, if only because we told them. And one day, if there is justice, any justice, they will stand in the dock at The Hague, their excuses stripped away.
Hopefully.
Any thoughts?
Well, I think we're going to get to one of the reasons in a bit about why the media is failing, you know? But,
Right.
yeah, I mean, it's not an accident. It is on purpose, you know? Like, I think that Kate Cook makes that clear here, that, like, it may seem like an accident, it's not. If all these mistakes are going in one direction, clearly there's a problem, you know?
Right.
So, and it's been happening. It's been in every war conflict we've been in, the media has been on board for it. So, yeah, I think it's, you know, par for the course, unfortunately, you know? So, and I mean, it's one of the reasons that places like us are demonetized. It's one of the reasons why many of our brothers and sisters are suppressed and demonetized. So, yeah, I mean, like, it's very clear to me how that shit's working. So, but speaking of demonetizing, you got to do this if you want to support us now. You got to go to ko-fi.com/Indie News Network, since YouTube doesn't want, you know, for you to be able to give us super chats. So you can do it this way by scanning the QR code on your screen. You can do it that way, or if you're in the live chat, you can put !donate. Get a little link, take you over there. If you can't give monetarily, don't forget to like and subscribe, hit and share, you know, commenting. Tell us what you think. You know, let us know. We'd love to hear it. So, you know, you can also go to other platforms by going to indienews.network and following the links to Rockfin and Rumble, which I will be checking out. So Anna Mayer's saying she loves us, but has to go. Appreciate you, Anna Mayers. You know, go hang out with Anna Mayers over on the Rockfin occasionally. You know, she could use friends over there. But yeah. All right. You ready for our last one?
I am.
Cool. All right. Well, Al Jazeera got banned from Israel. It's not the first time Al Jazeera has had some issues. Me and Indy covered a long time ago when the Al Jazeera building got bombed. They didn't bomb this building this time, but we're going to get into it. So, this from Juan Cole over at Informed Comment, Sheer Post, right? Talking about how Israel bans Al Jazeera journalists. So, Ann Arbor, the Committee to Protect Journalists on Sunday condemned the Israeli cabinet's decision to ban the Al Jazeera news network in Israel. The network's office was closed and its equipment was confiscated. Israeli cable channels were forced to delete Al Jazeera from their offerings, and even its website has been blocked for Israeli residents. Since Israeli news channels do not show the effects of the government's total war on Gaza civilians, the Qatar-based channel has been one of those few sources of comprehensive coverage of the Gaza campaign for those Israelis who know English or Arabic. On April 1st, the Israeli parliament, dominated by the country's far-right parties, passed a law permitting the government to halt the broadcast of foreign channels in Israel if the content is deemed to be a threat to the country's security during the ongoing war. Could you imagine if any other country did that? Just like banned another country's journalists because they're a threat to our national security? Like, I could think of one. Communications Minister Shlom Karhi called Al Jazeera an incitement channel and a mouthpiece of Hamas. It was a ridiculous charge for anyone who actually watches the live stream of Al Jazeera English. Carlos Martinez de la Serna, the New York-based director of the Committee to Protect Journalists, said CPJ condemns the closure of Al Jazeera's office in Israel and the blocking of the channel's websites. This move sets an extremely alarming precedent for restricting international media outlets working in Israel. The Israeli cabinet must allow Al Jazeera and all internal media outlets to openly operate freely in Israel, especially during wartime. The Israeli military has killed some 140 journalists in Gaza since it has sophisticated drone surveillance and facial recognition programs and other forms of electronic surveillance. Al Jazeera reports that some of the surviving journalists are convinced that their vehicles and convoys were deliberately targeted despite being clearly identified as press. One of the corruption cases being pursued in Israeli courts against Netanyahu has to do with his pressuring an Israeli newspaper to give him favorable coverage by threatening that otherwise the late casino mogul Sheldon Adelson would flood the market with free newspapers, hurting the profits of Yedath Ahronoth. These names, man. So, I had that. I don't know why that's on top of that, but this video will not be able to be showed in Israel now, but you know, you can watch it here if you're in Israel watching. We'll let you. But here we go. We'll let Al Jazeera explain some of this. If I can, here we go. And here, and play.
An unprecedented sight. Israeli police raid Al Jazeera's workspace in occupied East Jerusalem after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's cabinet voted to shut down the network's operations. The government order, which was unanimously agreed upon, includes confiscating its broadcast equipment, preventing the network's broadcasts, and blocking its websites.
The government has now unanimously ordered the closure of the incitement mouthpiece of Hamas in Israel, Al Jazeera.
Al Jazeera's broadcast was taken off Israel's main cable provider in the hours after the order. The emergency measure will last for 45 days, with the possibility of an extension for an additional 45 days. In a statement, Al Jazeera Media Network condemned the measure, saying in part, Israel's ongoing suppression of the free press, seen as an effort to conceal its actions in the Gaza Strip, stands in contravention of international and humanitarian law. Israel's direct targeting and killing of journalists, arrests, intimidation, and threats will not deter Al Jazeera from its commitment to cover, whilst more than 140 Palestinian journalists have been killed since the beginning of the war on Gaza. The network vehemently rejects the allegations presented by Israeli authorities, suggesting professional media standards have been violated. Last month, the White House said Israel's plans to close the network were, quote, concerning.
A move like this is concerning. We believe in the freedom of the press. It is critical. It is critically important, and the United States supports the critically important work journalists around the world do. And that includes those who are reporting in the conflict in Gaza.
The widely criticized move was also condemned.
Does that include independent media as well that that Google and like all your are trying to suppress? Does that include like Julian Assange, who is stuck in Belmarsh right now? Does that include like all the independent journalists who we probably don't even are not able to kind of share their stories given the suppression that they experience?
Yep. Yep.
By the Foreign Press Association, which urged the Israeli government to reverse what it called a harmful step, adding that this was a dark day for the media and a dark day for democracy. Hamda Salhout, Al-Jazeera.
Hagai Matar is executive director of Plus 972 magazine, which provides independent commentary and news from Israel and Palestine. Sir, you're joining us from Tel Aviv. Thank you for your time today. Your thoughts first on this decision by the Israeli government to shut down Al Jazeera in Israel.
I think, first of all, it's clearly a criminal and very dangerous decision, an attack on free speech and the freedom of the press. It's also an attack mostly on Israeli citizens, because I think the two main things that are going to happen alongside the attack on Al Jazeera journalists, which are also, of course, victims of this, will be one that while Al Jazeera will be able to continue reporting around the world, they will not be able to do reporting within Israel. So the voices of Israeli society will be heard less on Al Jazeera because of this. So this is one harm to the Israeli society. The other is making it more difficult to hear different voices. We have very limited access to information coming out of Gaza in Israeli media outlets. And I think it's essential for Israelis to have other media outlets to go to and check and read and see and view to get information that is not there in Israeli sources.
But big picture, what's this going to change? I mean, granted, our teams in Israel, in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, they can't work. But we're still here. We're still going to report the news. The rest of the world can still see us outside of Israel. So what's the point?
I think there are 2 points. One is to make it more difficult for Israelis to see, which I think is more important for the government than what the rest of the world sees. The other is basically serving the base. We have this issue that Netanyahu and his party in the far right have been failing this war. This is, fact. I'm not even talking about the massacre of tens of thousands of Palestinians, the ethnic cleansing, the destruction, all of that. But even from an Israeli perspective, after 7 months, people are saying the hostages, most of them aren't back. Many of them are dying. It doesn't seem like there's a victory at hand. So doing something like this is a way to appease the base, to say, look, we're doing something to fight our enemies, and let's pin all our failures on Al Jazeera, just like we would on students in U.S. campuses.
Do you see them at some point reversing this decision? Because interestingly, the way the law is structured, this decision is applicable for 45 days, but then they would have to renew it if they want to keep banning Al Jazeera from Israel in a month and a half.
Yes, and it is subject to court supervision. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens when we go to the courts. I'm not putting a lot of faith in that process. I don't see them reversing this measure in the near future unless this is some sort of a ploy within negotiations and what the government may think is a tool to pressure the Qatari government in the negotiations for the release of hostages. If that's the case, maybe they will reverse it as part of a deal for a ceasefire. But I have to say, I'm very pessimistic about the degree to which the Israeli government is interested in such a deal. And therefore, I'm also not very optimistic about reversing this decision.
Okay, Hagai Matar, Executive Director of Plus 972 magazine. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news.
Yeah. Listen to her. Subscribe to our channel. But anyway, anything you want to say before finishing this out?
I mean, I said it in the last segment. It's just the idea of this is the last step, or one among the last steps, to ensure that this genocide is silent. Now, the thing is, fortunately, we have social media, so it wouldn't be silent completely.
No.
But given, what our government is trying to do with TikTok, and funny enough, I saw a clip, I think it was with, who was it? Shoot. I think it was with Blinken, and I forgot the other politician who it was. They basically admitted just point blank that, you know how, like, in government, they were like, we're concerned about TikTok given, like, safety concerns with China and blah, blah. They basically straight out admitted that, no, it was, there was too much pro-Palestinian coverage. They just straight up admitted it. Yeah. Thank you, Jamie. It was Mitt Romney.
Mitt Romney,
Yeah, that Link was talking to. So it's just the idea of trying to suppress the very information that people need in order for them to be fully aware and have standing as to what's going on, but also for a way for Israel to kind of continue to control the narrative with our support. And and it's just going to be very easy to kind of smear or dismiss, given, as they said, Israel has killed over 100 journalists. Like, we reported on one prominent one, Rafah Arir, like back in December. So, and it's funny again, Monday, it was World Press Freedom Day.
Right.
And when did this happen? Like,
no talks about Shireen, no talks about Rafat, no talks about, any of the press.
Right. Honestly, there should have been more of an outrage about this. Given Monday again was World Press Freedom Day. The fact that Israel shut down Al-Jazeera in the country, in the state, given their coverage, for basically exposing them for the genocidal maniacs that they are. It's just insane. And then our country, the gall to say, oh, we support, the idea of free speech. Meanwhile, you're suppressing it here. So you can take a seat.
And you said it was Friday. And he's listing other Palestinian journalists as well, Motaz Azyaza and Wal El Dadu. So, but this article continues. So banning foreign news channels and reporters is not a new thing in the Middle East or the wider world. It has usually been done by governments that the U.S. denounces as autocratic. Israel has now joined their ranks. For instance, the U.S. State Department says in a report critical of press censorship in Syria, on July 8th, the Ministry of Information canceled the accreditation of the BBC in areas under its control following the outlet's June 27th investigative report into the regime's involvement in the Captagon drug trade, according to local media. The report adds citizens widely used satellite dishes, although the regime jammed some foreign Arabic networks. The cancellation of Al Jazeera's accreditation by the Netanyahu regime, jamming of Al Jazeera in Israel, would be hard to distinguish from the press policies of Bashar al-Assad in Syria. As for Iran, the State Department says the government jammed satellite broadcasts, a continuous practice since at least 2003, it adds. The Ministry of Culture and Islamic Guidance severely limited and controlled foreign media organizations' ability to work in the country. The ministry required foreign correspondents to provide detailed travel plans and topics of proposed stories before granting visas, limited their ability to travel within the country, and forced them to work with a local minder. State slams Iran, saying authorities routinely cited laws on protecting national security to arrest or punish critics of the government and human rights defenders, or to deter criticism of government policies or officials. Yet the April 1st law passed by the Israeli Knesset appeals to exactly the same grounds, protecting national security, to permit expulsion and banning of foreign correspondence channels. That is, there may be a difference in degree between Iran's presence in Israel, but there is not a difference in kind. The grounds cited by Israel for closing down foreign news operations in the country are not different from those used by Putin's Russia, the State Department notes. Expanding the definition of sensitive data, the FSB published in 2021 a list of topics that be used against the security of Russia, including information and assessments of the country's military security sector and space agency, Roscosmos. Individuals who collected information in the specified categories could be subject to designation as foreign agents. Just the government headed by Netanyahu, which had directly funded to Hamas for years before the October 7th attack, snarkily implied that Al-Jazeera was overly friendly with Hamas. So the Russians used xenophobic grounds to censor. According to the State Department, during the year, authorities used a law banning cooperation with undesirable foreign organizations to restrict free expression. For example, in January, the independent Russian news outlet Medusa was added to the list of undesirable organizations. Russia has forced many journalists to register as foreign agents. The law allowed authorities to label individuals, both Russian and foreign citizens, as foreign agents if they disseminated foreign media to an unspecified number of persons receiving funding from abroad or, after 2020 amendment, carry out the interests of a foreign state, as here. I'll remind people. The amendment specified that a foreign journalist performing the functions of a foreign agent incompatible with his professional activity as a journalist could be declared an individual foreign agent. They had to register and mark the content as produced by a foreign agent, as do we here, one by the way. This is clearly how Netanyahu views Al Jazeera journalists. This fear of international journalism also afflicts the government of Kim Jong-un in North Korea, of which state observes the government prohibited ordinary citizens from listening to foreign media broadcasts and subjected violators to severe punishment. Radios and television sets, unless altered, received only domestic programming. The government attempted to jam all foreign radio broadcasts. So, one could almost figuring it out. But you know, like sometimes you gotta have other stuff to wake people up. So, but yeah, any thoughts before we head out of here? I think we're, support independent media, as another person in the chat might tell you.
Well, actually, I do have not a thought, but do you mind sharing? I sent it to you in the Discord.
Yeah, I can find that.
I just sent it to you, so
Yeah.
because I think this is very appropriate given this segment. Of
Hold
the
it up.
Donahue view that you clipped. So, well, I clipped it, but you gave it.
Yeah. Here.
Say to this gentleman.
Sound?
So yeah, we played this a few weeks ago, but I think given everything that's been happening, and this actually was doing very well when I clipped it out and posted it on Monday on Twitter. I think it's very appropriate given this segment you just did that we hear this again.
Yeah, I would just like to say to this gentleman, I would like to say to this gentleman and all other people who are not blessed with melanin at this point in time, to understand that what has happened in our history is that you have been misinformed as much as we have been misinformed. Much of the information that is brought forth, not only from Dr. Muhammad, but other areas, other scholars, are not available to you, as the sister said, in your curriculums that you have for 400 years when you did not allow us to read and write and was being hidden. Whether you, sir, personally did that or not, it was a legacy that was passed on to you. And I end by saying the Holocaust is simply the greatest atrocity on film. Ours was not filmed. Yeah, I would just like.
So,
I mean, add the Palestinians to that list.
Yeah.
Because their education infrastructure is decimated. Like, no universities, no schools, journalists dead, like any means of information to even even just the idea of carrying out their legacy to future generations is in danger of being extinct now.
Yeah.
All at the hand of Israel. And that should be very concerning, I think, especially given, Israel being a proxy to us, because if you think that Israel, if you think that the Americans are not, it's not capable of happening here, you're dead wrong.
Yeah. It is happening.
Yeah, it is happening here. I think just in terms of, people are worried about China, spying on you.
China.
Trump gave the goods on that already, when he was president. So, the government already has your information that they could sell off.
Yep.
Name their price, and you're worried about China, what they're going to do. China has no interest in knowing, what you're looking on your phone late at night when you're all alone. But our country does. So, yeah. But I think it's just the idea of and I say this time and time again, it's the idea, white tragedy and white resistance gets, popularized and movies and books, and we learn all about it in our curriculum as the standard in terms of how to move in terms of living in the West, while resistance, anything related to people of color, is either suppressed, not talked about, hidden, or just straight up lied about.
Nat Turner cough? What?
Right. So it's just, but again, as I said earlier, this is going to be one of the greatest tragedies that, ironically, given the information that we have now, could have been prevented. But we're just falling right into history in terms of not doing all that we can possibly can to stop this genocide from really being fulfilled in terms of actually really decimating the Palestinian community, and people are too scared or too bought to say anything, and worse yet, even stand up against it. Again, college students, salute you, because, and they've said, many of them, they're willing to give up their lives and careers for the betterment of humanity in this case. What are our politicians sacrificing? What is the squad sacrificing in order to ensure the well-being of Palestine? They're not. So, so it's just the idea of, our college students have more balls than the people who we put in office that actually has the means to do something, and they're not doing it.
No, clearly not. Which is why, like I said earlier, support independent media. There's a reason why we're deboosted and demonetized, as we talked about in this segment. So go to ko-fi.com/IndieNewsNetwork or scan the QR code on your screen. If you want to help keep the lights on over here in Indie Town. Otherwise, just like and subscribe, hit the share button, comment. We're heavily suppressed, so please share this with your like-minded friends. We appreciate all the new people showing up and hitting the subscribe button, so, keep doing you. But anyway, let's pull up. Indy sent me this.
And Indy sent me some notes.
Okay.
So,
here you go. Do something with that.
So hold on, let me pull up his notes. Thank you, Indy. So let's see. So tomorrow night, we have Politically Homeless with Crab and Himbo, and Jesse is going to join them tomorrow night. That's at 9 Eastern time. Friday, we have that's Larry
Johnson.
Larry Johnson. He'll be on with Tara at 2. 10:30, having the clip show, American Tradition clip show, with Jesse and Indy. Friday.
It's American tradition.
Okay, Angel in the afternoon will be on at 7 on Friday. Saturday at 8, Angel is going to be on with Pro Wrestling Talk. So Indy wanted to say the stream is already made. So if you go to our channel and if people want to link to it just so they get alert when it goes live, you just want to say that. 11 o'clock, So Himbo is doing his video streaming. Sunday, not sure if there will be How Do We Miss That, given that it's Mother's Day. And he needs to spend time with the wife
Family
and the mama of
last
kids.
Sunday we did boat smashing into other boats uncensored on Rumble. Go check that out on our Rumble channel if you're interested. Let us know what you think over there. How'd it go? Want another one? Let me know. Want something to change? Let me know. Send me your thoughts.
So, and he say he may run a clip show on Sunday for How Do We Miss That.
Okay.
Fairly certain on Tuesday will be American Tradition with Jesse and Indy. And then we'll be back on again next week for Island News.
Yep.
So, thanks, Indy, for trying to see.
Appreciate you.
Yep. He got everything he wanted to say.
Cool.
So,
sounds good to me. All right, fam. I think that's it. As always, remember, labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
Have a good week, everyone.
We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
Bye, have a great time.
you